And today's stage 19 with the general classification featuring Alberto Contador leading Alejandro Valverde and Joaquim Rodriguez in the top three, all separated by 2.5 minutes. Steve Schlanger, Todd Gogulski, and Contador 1 day closer to another Grand Tour title.
And with 152 over Valverde, 228 over Rodriguez, don't look for any general classification changes today. It's a relatively mild stage, more or less for the sprinters, but tomorrow, the Bola del Mundo, 23% grades. Once again, look for it to be on.
Alberto Contador led the field off the line earlier today in the start town of Penafiel, which 2 years ago hosted the team time trial at the Vuelta. But today, it's a point-to-point stage, heading south before looping back north. But for the second consecutive day at the Vuelta, no categorized climbs along the way.
It is 178.4 kilometers. It's about 111 miles, and it is lumpy, but no categorized climbs, as you say, Steve. The issue today is there is an uphill finish, and that finish being 2 kilometers, a little bit uphill, may just derail the field sprint possibilities.
We're down to the final 3 days of the third Grand Tour of the season. Headed to this finish in La Estrella, and that's coming up as our live racing gets underway. Front of the field on stage 19, just over 5 minutes behind a two-man breakaway with still over 90 kilometers left to go. Yes, that is right, 90K still remaining. The red line right in the middle of the stage, and you can see that there is some lumpy terrain the rest of the way to a slightly uphill finish. Just 178 kilometers overall after a 200+ K stage yesterday. But the bulk of that still remaining here on stage 19. It's been a much slower average pace than what we saw yesterday.
And 2 guys off the front, no threat whatsoever in the general classification. But the little bit of threat that does exist today, notice how small these roads are and notice how exposed they are if there is some wind. So there's just a puff of wind out of the riders right now. But if they get a serious crosswind at any point with this much exposure on these small roads, then we will see a very different bike race today.
Right in the middle of the screen, the green jersey is Joaquim Rodriguez. On the right-hand side, you have the red jersey of overall leader Alberto Contador. Their teams riding almost side by side here. You have Contador in red, Rodriguez in green. Alejandro Valverde, who is second on the GC, is wearing a white jersey today.
And these guys just trying to get through this day with as little use of energy as possible. These 2 leaders, on the other hand, trying to hold on to the impossible.
Now the man out front is Aitor Galdos, 32-year-old from Caja Rural, and his companion, Jose Vicente Toribio, a 26-year-old from Andalusia, who is riding his third ever Vuelta a Espana. These 2 jumped the field inside the first kilometer of the race today. So they've been out front the entire stage. Largest lead, 10 minutes, 17 seconds, so it's just about been cut in half since its largest point. But it is a long day out front in the wind on the flat roads and still quite a ways to go.
Well, and these guys would have needed an advantage of 20 minutes before it started coming down to have any real shot at staying away. But, you know, once you're out there, you make the best of it.
Steve Schlanger, Todd Gogulski. As we enter the final weekend of the season's final Grand Tour, we have this flat stage today, the last summit finish tomorrow on the Bola del Mundo, and then the ceremonial final stage, the parade into the Spanish capital of Madrid on Sunday, which is stage 21.
And this is a very typical scene we see. Markel Irizar on the front for Radio Shack, Yukihiro Doi in the second spot, the Japanese national champion for Argo Shimano. Those guys riding for yesterday's winner, Bonatti, and Degenkolb, who was 5th yesterday, but he's won the other 4 previous field sprints.
Well, Gogo, it's such a slow pace today. Still 90 kilometers left to go for our 2 leaders. Is this a combination of circumstances such as the high rate of speed yesterday and then anticipating the big climbs and the summit finish tomorrow when we're kind of in an in-between day, and so the speed maybe just comes down a little bit?
Yeah, and add to that the fact that 2 guys being away is very easy to control. If this were an 8-man breakaway with a lot of horsepower, the field would have to ride harder to bring them back, so it would be a faster pace.
And with a slightly uphill finish today, the last chance for a rider to win a stage who is not a true sprinter or a true climber. We have one of those in-between sorts of finishes where you could have some kind of a reduced field sprint maybe, but it's not flat. It has that uphill kick right at the finish. So if you've missed out on winning a stage and you still have aspirations, but you're not a climber or a sprinter, today's your last chance. And some teams who have not yet won a stage that are still ambitious enough to try and snag one in these final 3 days will certainly be going for it today. As again, we have Rodriguez in the green jersey, followed a couple of wheels behind by Contador in red. And Rodriguez, for his part, has been extremely gracious about losing the lead, especially given the circumstances of this entire race. He was leading for the better part of 2 weeks, and then just getting caught by surprise by the man in red there, Alberto Contador, and his team coming off the rest day. There's our first look in the white jersey of Alejandro Valverde, the man who sits second on the GC. But for Rodriguez, the way things were going so right before they went decidedly wrong, he's handled it exceptionally well.
The odd thing to me about Rodriguez is that all along he kept basically saying that he was not comfortable, that he thought that Contador was somehow going to take it away from him. It was like he's never won a Grand Tour, and he just maybe couldn't get comfortable with the possibility that he actually was in the driver's seat for the first time in his life. And Alberto, on the other hand, a multiple Grand Tour winner, he kept saying, it's not over. You know, he would go to Perito after the race, I'm going to attack you some more tomorrow.
What struck me about his comments after losing the red jersey a couple of days ago, he said that it was such a spectacular day for the sport of cycling that he was just glad to be a part of it, which seems kind of odd. It's definitely a gracious way to look at things, but let's be honest, to win a Grand Tour, you have to have kind of a nasty streak. You got to have a sense of meanness to your performance. I mean, you got to go out there with the killer instinct, and Rodriguez maybe just doesn't have that.
It's a very strange position to see him in, because you see Rodriguez on the uphill finishes on the stages that he has won, and he has a total killer instinct. But he has the killer instinct more, it seems, one day at a time than maybe over 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, it's a very odd situation as we're back up to our two leaders here, Galdos and Vicente Toribio. You just wonder long term, is that going to always compromise Rodriguez's chances of winning a Grand Tour? He's obviously making incremental progress over these last few years, getting better and getting closer. But is something about his personality or the way he approaches Grand Tours, is something always going to be a problem for him?
I would say no. Before this year, I would have said that we would have never even seen him this close. As you said, he's been getting better every year. And I think there are two sides to the coin. One is, if you're able to be a little bit relaxed and comfortable, you don't burn so much nervous energy. You sleep better, you recover better day by day in these races. And so that's what he has going for him. So he just needs to have things go just that hair different in one of these upcoming Grand Tours in his career, and he can win one. He definitely displayed he has the strength to do it. He definitely displayed his team is good enough to do it. They just got worked over a couple of days ago, and he lost it.
And one more thought going ahead to next year and in the future, Rodriguez isn't always going to be in the same Grand Tours as Alberto Contador, so he may not have to worry about Contador all the time as he tries to finally win that elusive Grand Tour title. Still a long way to go. Stage 19, just under 90K left on the road. 86 kilometers left to go on stage 19 at the Vuelta a Espana. We still have two leaders, Aitor Galdos and Jose Vicente Toribio out front. No threats on the general classification. Their lead down to right around 5 minutes after enjoying a maximum margin of over 10 minutes earlier in the stage.
And so now some raindrops starting to fall just that little bit. And that could actually change this stage. It could make it quite a bit more grippy for the guys back here in the peloton. Small roads, once again, if there's some wind gusts that come up with the rain, it could be interesting. And Rodriguez there pulling over on the right side of the road.
Looks like nature break time.
It does.
And if you notice the pictures, we have as many modes of transportation as you could possibly get. We have motorcycles, bikes, horses, dirt bikes, cars behind the riders, and a helicopter.
It's really a shame we don't have a train track next to it.
We need a train and a bus somewhere.
Well, there are certainly buses around.
Planes, trains, automobiles, and more at the Vuelta today. And the horses definitely going faster than the riders at the slow pace that the peloton is proceeding at today, without a doubt.
It's actually quite a bit of fun when a motorcycle rides next to the peloton. I've been in races before, actually team time trials, where an ex-teammate was on his dirt bike next to us down in Mexico, encouraging us on, riding through the dirt as we were blazing through the countryside.
It definitely makes for a cool shot. You see the open countryside, the horses, the guys on the dirt bike, and then the colors in the big peloton.
It's a nice distraction for the guys after some very intense racing, and kind of maybe helps them forget a little bit about what they're in for tomorrow on the Bola del Mundo as well.
And you can see they're all looking over and enjoying it for the moment. They realize that things are under control, 85K to go, and two guys up the road who are well within reason and not a threat on the general classification. And these guys in the dirt bikes are just egging them along, saying, come on, guys. What's with the pavement? Come off-road with us. Do a real man's ride.
What a long day for two guys to be off the front, but you know, we see this a lot in professional cycling, and these guys would have certainly liked to have had more men in the break with them. It would have made their lives not only a lot more enjoyable, but given them much more of a chance to actually stay away. 85 kilometers to go still for these two guys. It's about time the peloton took a little bit of a breather. I mean, the last couple of days have been way ahead of the fastest pace for the organization that had guessed what speed they would go.
This rider Galdos, a 32-year-old, in his first ever Vuelta, has been dealing with some stomach problems throughout the race. Comes from a cyclocross background, also spent a few years with the Euskaltel squad before moving over to Caja Rural, and then Jose Vicente Toribio here for Andalusia. Won a stage last year at the Tour of Portugal, now in his third Vuelta. But if you had to pick two teams on an innocuous day to go up the road and be in a breakaway, it would be riders from the two teams we have here, Caja Rural, Andalusia, Spanish teams who don't do a lot in the GC or in the sprints. So they're getting their exposure and their promotional value out of the Vuelta here today on stage 19.
Yeah, and these are two teams that are invited teams to the race as they cruise through the feed zone there. They are not automatically entered in the bike race like the top 18 teams are. They're two of the four teams that have to get a special invitation. So they really need to show themselves in the race to help ensure they get invited again next year.
One rider did crash, although he's back on his bike and has rejoined the peloton. It would be the only Chinese rider to ever participate in the Vuelta a España, Ji Cheng, who, by the way, is last on the general classification. Of all 177 riders left in the race, he is dead last at 3 hours and 48 minutes behind our leader, Alberto Contador. Think about that, Gogo. Contador could almost stop, play 18 holes of golf, get back on his bike, and still be leading Ji Cheng at the end of the race.
Well, they have, first of all, very different objectives in the race, right? Ji Cheng is on the front, riding tempo, bringing back breakaways like today for his team sprinter on Argos Shimano, John Degenkolb. So once he gets the break caught, then he often will sit up and lose a bunch of time.
I just think it's fascinating, the time gap that exists. I mean, it's almost 4 hours, so if you put that in an additional context, Contador could almost finish the stage, go back, re-ride the stage, and still be ahead of Zheng at the end.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of days of racing, and the guys that are the best, they have a massive time difference over the guys that are maybe in their first one or been sick or just not really general classification guys in general.
Now, this year's Vuelta has really showcased the country in a spectacular way, as we see the Junior Vuelta proceeding along as well. Kids on all kinds of bikes. It's still the Spanish holiday season. That's one of the reasons that they moved the Vuelta up earlier on the calendar to get these late summer days in where the Spanish folks are still on holiday. So the kids have been out. People on horseback, dirt bikes, and these real bikes. As on this final Friday of the Vuelta, people even on this rather desolate and exposed part of the course have found their way over to check out the Vuelta a Espana.
I don't think these guys ever expected to be on the worldwide feed on their motorcycles for this long during the bike race.
It's a long ride back wherever they came from, too. They've been following the race for quite a while. As they roll along here, still over 80K remaining on stage 19. So a perfect time for a feed zone with nothing going on in the race, no threats of any kind. So they can casually make their way through. Wide, well-paved road, so good spot to stop and have lunch.
Slightly uphill, so it slows down the peloton just a little bit. But always these feed zones can be a little bit scary. For crashes, look up in the distance. Rain, squalls there. So today, this day could get a little bit tricky. It's just all going to depend on where the weather goes.
Well, it's been the best weather Grand Tour I think we've had in a while. This is really the first day of any serious chance of rain. We've seen a few drops, nothing steady. And even Alberto Contador, prior to taking the race lead, was saying that he was hoping for some rain. He was hoping for wind and bad weather because he would have been more in his element and he believed would have a better chance of succeeding in dropping Joaquim Rodriguez. Well, ultimately he didn't need the bad weather, didn't get it, but still on a sunny day rode into the red jersey and now has it going into these final 3 days. And on stage 19, finally starting to see our first raindrops of the race.
Alberto, such a consummate competitor that he was always looking and analyzing and thinking about what he could do to get the better of Joaquim Rodriguez. So day after day on the summit finishes, he was unable to drop him. So he had to look for other things. He had to think, well, maybe if it rains, that'll give me a better shot. And ultimately, it was not a rainy day on stage 17, but it was a very hard day that was out of control, and he was able to capitalize on that.
Well, he sat down with his team director this past Tuesday during the rest day, and they talked strategy.
There's Quintana, who crashed yesterday, and great to see him in high spirits, because he was really hurting the other day. He's only 22, he's in his first Grand Tour, and he's been instrumental in Valverde's second place overall.
He was curled up in the fetal position on the side of the road after crashing. Didn't look like he was going to continue, and one of the other riders who was caught up in that crash yesterday, Linus Gerdemann of Radio Shack Nissan, actually had to pull out of the race because of his injuries, but Quintana got back on his bike, kept going, and here he is smiling a day later.
Fantastic ride by him yesterday and many days in this race, and he's actually a guy that has been called by the promoter of the Tour de France as a possible dark horse for next year's Tour de France. He's shown himself so well, and earlier this year one of the Sky Colombians was saying, on a different team, was saying that he may be the next Colombian winner of a Grand Tour.
I'll throw you a curveball, ask you a difficult question here as we see Contador in the red jersey coming up alongside his Saxo Bank teammates just ahead of Joaquim Rodriguez, who's in the green jersey there. Saw the Saxo Bank riders a moment ago. Everybody's drinking Coke. Throughout the race, it's all been Coca-Cola. Why not Pepsi? Why not Dr. Pepper? Why not a different soda? And I'm serious. I mean, is it a sponsor deal with the team? Is there a reason they drink the same type of soda?
That's, I've never even thought about that before, but...
Because they would all theoretically have the same benefit, right?
Well, I've never seen anything but Coke consumed. Really? In a bike race. I mean, when I didn't drink many sodas when I was racing, but if I ever drank one, it was a Coke. When all my teammates drank them, they were Cokes. They were always Coke.
I think I would go with Diet Slice.
Well, that's not going to work. You can't go diet. Terralongo, another man who's had an interesting race, as he was one of the men who crashed in the opening team time trial.
How about him for the stage today? With a little uphill finish, I mean, it's not out of the question.
I don't know. Yeah, definitely an outsider. I don't think the finish is hard enough for him to deploy his uphill skills. And he also is complaining that he's still not back from his crash, believe it or not.
Well, he did help Alberto Contador a few days ago in that epic ride to take the red jersey. He was out front with Contador at one point and actually led him out to an intermediate sprint where then Contador came around and got the maximum time bonus of 6 seconds. There's Contador just off his right shoulder. Those two very good friends, even though they are on different teams. And so Tirolongo did a lot of work to help Contador secure that red jersey he's wearing right now.
Indeed, he did. And Contador, when Contador gifted Tirolongo that stage of the Giro last year, it was Tirolongo's first race win as a professional. So it was a big deal. Those guys are very good friends, and Contador even was trying to get him on the Saxo Bank team for this year, but they didn't work that out for some reason.
Leaders on the left and the field on the right. 4.5 minutes is the difference with just about 80K to go. Two leaders a little under that, and the peloton coming up on the 80K mark. Radio Shack Nissan at the front of the field for the most part. They have a few riders up there after winning their first stage of this year's race yesterday with sprinter Daniele Benatti.
Oh, and that's always good for the morale of the team. So Irizar once again doing big turns on the front, just like he did yesterday to bring back the breakaway, and hoping that Benatti can get another one.
Joaquim Rodriguez in position to potentially keep that green jersey and win the points competition at the end of this Vuelta.
He looks like he's in a very good position to win that competition, but unfortunately for him, that's not what he was here for. He was here to try and win the overall, and things just went all wrong for him on stage 17.
Well, 10 different teams have won stages in this year's Vuelta. 7 different nationalities have been stage winners. So it's not quite half the field has won stages. So now in these final 3 days, if you're a team that's missed out, you're looking for an opportunity. And 3 distinctly different types of finishes coming up, with the slight uphill at the end of today, big summit finish tomorrow, and then the flat field sprint anticipated on the final day in the Spanish capital of Madrid. 3 hours in on stage 19 of the Vuelta. As we come back live on stage 19 with our 2 leaders, intermittent rainfall as they come down to the final 70 kilometers of today's stage. And what makes it interesting is the fact, as you look at the cathedral in the distance in San Sebastian, Via Castin, what makes it interesting is the fact that for Valverde, it would have cemented his position higher up on the general classification. As it was, he's still been in 3rd before leapfrogging Joaquim Rodriguez into 2nd place, but it wouldn't have been as much of a chase.
Yeah, and it would have changed the dynamics. So David Moncoutier has actually finally announced that he really will retire here
I
after
believe it when I see it.
Winning the mountains classification the last 4 years and a stage the last 4 years at the Vuelta. But he says now he is really serious about retirement. Back to the Valverde crash situation, it would have changed the dynamic of the race. So we can't just say, well, you could give him back the 55 seconds and that's where they would now be in the general classification, because teams would have had different tactics, different teams would have ridden at different points. It could have been a completely different bike race, and we might have not had Alberto Contador. In fact, we likely wouldn't have had Alberto Contador in the leader's jersey. It just changes everything.
Do you think that caused Valverde a chance at winning this race, or do you think that Contador or Rodriguez, given what may have happened, we still will never know, but do you think that one of those 2 guys would still have ultimately won the race?
Well, I mean, I guess I shouldn't speculate that much about if Contador would still be in the jersey today or not, but I think Valverde had an honest chance to win without that crash. And like I say, it just changes the entire dynamic. You have different teams riding at the front for different objectives at different times.
And look at it this way, and again, this is all speculative, but Alejandro Valverde has won 2 stages. He came close to beating Contador on the stage that Contador won 2 days ago, only finished 6 seconds behind him, so that would have been a maximum time bonus of 12 seconds. Perhaps things would have played out differently with Valverde's team riding at the front and not letting Contador get away. So I think that crash could conceivably have cost Valverde a chance of potentially winning this race. Again, we're never going to know, but it did compromise his chances.
Oh yeah, it was a complete game changer for the general classification. We'll never know what would have happened, but we do know that it was a game changer, and we could have had a different winner of this race.
And after that stage, Valverde went right to the Team Sky bus and confronted them because they didn't stop riding. They were at the front and had just started to really pick up the pace split seconds before the crash. So the conversation was, did they try and take advantage and exploit the crash of Valverde, or were they already riding hard? And that's where the debate came in.
Well, and sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment there, as notice the guys all trying to get their calories in right now, they're going to need them for tomorrow's stage. But when you're in the heat of the moment and the crosswind is just starting to happen, and all of a sudden it starts getting slammed in the gutter and you're the race leader, it's really easy to lose your cool a little bit. And honestly, from what we saw, it didn't look like it was a bad move by Sky to keep going. The race was just starting to happen, and Valverde was the casualty.
Now look at this gap, now down to 2.5 minutes and still 68 kilometers to go. So at this pace, our two leaders are going to be brought back well in advance of the finish. Their lead at its largest point was 10 minutes 17 seconds. It's been coming down since we've come on the air at the 90K mark, coming down pretty steadily. So we'll see how long, in fact, they do hang on. But if they are caught at the pace the peloton is bringing them back, we could see a lot more attacks in the remainder of this stage.
And now let's also look back at that general classification battle, Steve, because we were talking before stage 16 where they had their massive uphill battle to the Cuitu Negru, and that was supposed to be the queen stage of the race, and Rodriguez was saying, no, I think the Bola del Mundo is. Well, after that day, then Rodriguez said, well, no, maybe the Bola del Mundo's not. Well, at this point, Contador is saying the Bola del Mundo is going to be the queen stage, and he says he would like to save all the energy he can today because tomorrow he thinks he's going to face a massive battle.
Mikel Astorloza is number 72 along with teammate Igor Anton, number 71 for Euskaltel. Just talking about all the missed opportunities for this Euskaltel team, and maybe Anton in particular. He came here with GC aspirations. Those quickly turned to just winning a stage after falling behind early in week number 1. And still has not pulled that off. So Euskaltel running out of time with the rest of the teams.
This is a very mellow day for the guys. You always have to keep in mind that things can change in literally less than a second. A crash, something comes up, mechanical at the wrong time.
You have that potential for the false sense of security because, as you can see by just the reactions of the riders here, this is as much a day off, quote unquote, as you could get at a Grand Tour race. But it's not a day off. You're still competing. What they're doing now counts just as much as what they're doing on a summit finish. So if something happens, it's not like they can reset the clock.
Yeah, that's right. It's that riders have over the course of 3 weeks is maintaining that focus and always riding in position so that you never allow yourself to be in a place where something can go wrong.
So our two leaders with 2.5 minutes. Coming up on the final 66 kilometers of a relatively harmless stage 19. Long way to go, but an uphill finish waiting at the end. Stage 19, first of the final 3 days at the third Grand Tour of the 2012 campaign. Long way to go. Slow pace today for the field, and that's been in pursuit of a two-man breakaway since the opening gun. Aitor Galdos and Jose Vicente Toribio shot clear of the field in the first kilometer. Had a lead of over 10 minutes at one point. It's down to closer to 2 minutes right now, but that's just a natural process of attrition. This field has not been in real hot pursuit all day long. Saxo Bank at the front, along with Lotto Belisol, Movistar, Sky, Cofidis. Every team almost has some representatives near the front. No team working really in a collective fashion to bring the two-rider breakaway back at this point. And so the gap has gone back out a little, 2:41 with 65K left.
Johnny Mearsman, the sprinter for Lotto Belisol, saying yesterday he wasn't planning on going for it because it was too flat, saving everything for today's finish with the uphill. So Mearsman, another one of the guys that thinks he has a shot at it. We've seen his teammates on the front. Vicente Reyes has been up there a little bit, riding some tempo with the Argos Shimano rider. So, you know, there are a lot of guys that think they have a shot at this uphill finish. It's not probably for the pure fast men. I don't know that Benatti's going to have a day. Apparently he also didn't sleep real well after celebrating heavily yesterday after a stage win.
Daniel Teklehemano, number 158 of Eritrea. He's been working to lead out sprinter Alan Davis on the flat stages so far at this year's race. He's crashed himself, gotten back up, continued in the race.
And he'll have a lot of work to do later today because Alan Davis is one of the hot favorites today. And so Orica Greenedge will be tasked to do a lot of work and to get Davis into the spot.
Aldea Vieja is the town that the riders hit. With just over 65K to go, our two leaders just passing through a few moments ago. They have made an alteration to the route today. They've added a few kilometers, and in particular, they added a small climb, which the riders, it looks like, maybe onto now. Right around this point with 65 or so K to go for the field now. This is where that new climb was thrown in. Not a categorized climb, just a rise in the road for the most part. So they didn't tell us specifically where the climb started and finished, but this could be it, the way they're going uphill.
Yeah, adding about 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles to the bike race today. So the intermediate sprints were both moved as well. One was moved to very early on the course and the other to very late with just about 5 kilometers to go. Steve, I think we should actually talk about the points competition a little bit at this point because we had this battle.
Have enough time?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay, just making sure.
And we know we had this battle that was shaping up between John Degenkolb, who's been the best sprinter in the race, and the GC men, most notably Perito Rodriguez. And Degenkolb needed to just continue to get maximum points in the field sprint days. Yesterday, with him coming across in 5th, it may have actually ruined his chances for the overall of the points classification. That one sprint may have done it for him.
And it was a surprise. It looked like a sprint on paper that was ideally suited for him. But his team, late in the stage, disappeared from the front. They didn't do any work. They set some tempo very early in the day's proceedings, but they were nowhere to be found late. And Degenkolb, for the first time, did not have the speed of some of the other sprinters.
Yeah, and it was a very unusual sprint as well because it looked like Sky was going to take it all the way to the line, and then right before the sprint launched, Ian Stannard was on the front for Ben Swift on Sky, and he realized that Swift was not on his wheel, so he had kind of lost his impetus. The front of the group mushroomed just a little bit. Swift ended up being the first guy to jump, but it was a little disorganized yesterday. There was no clear lead out into the final jump.
Makes you wonder what we're going to see at the end of today's stage 19 because it's more uphill than what they faced yesterday.
Which typically brings a lot more chaos to the finish of a bike race.
A lot of narrow roads on today's route. So the riders using just about every inch of it right now. As we move back through the field, still 2.5 minutes behind our two leaders and in no hurry to tug on that line. Well, again, we mentioned all of the modes of transportation before with the helicopter, the dirt bikes, the horses. Now we have the heavy machinery. What is next?
And I would say that's pretty heavy.
Quarry region. that the riders are proceeding by right now as Alberto Contador stretches the legs somewhat, and in that red jersey rides closer to the front.
Yeah, Vicente Reines on the front for Lotto Belisol. Right behind him, that is Markel Irizar. And then out of the saddle, Thiago Machado, the next Radio Shack man in line. Reines actually is a very good uphill sprint, but apparently they're not going to ride it for Reines. They're going to do it for Meersman.
It also makes you wonder, too, because the final 5K are kind of up and down, and then it goes uphill in the final 2K to the finish. They have a right-hand loop that leads into the last kilometer, and then they have it straight all the way from the red kite to the finish in that final kilometer of racing. But given the fact that it looks like our two-man breakaway will be brought back well ahead of the finish, they're just 2.5 up the road now with 62K left to go. So there's the potential for more attacks, and other guys who may not be good in a sprint, realizing it is an uphill finish, may try to get away late in the race and just hold off the other sprinters and the rest of the field. So we have a lot of different possibilities for how the final kilometers could play out.
Yeah, it's always harder for a team to really put a stranglehold on a slight uphill drag to a finish line. It's harder for them to keep the rate of speed so high that no one else can attack. And so when they're looking at just under 5K is where it starts going uphill, that does give people opportunities to try and disrail or derail any lead-out trains that are happening.
Just casually rolling along here, 3.5 hours in, still 62K to go. Get comfortable, folks. The peloton in no hurry to bring back our two leaders. It's been quite a while that those two, Galdos and Vicente Toribio, have been out front by themselves, and the field has had them well within their sights for over the last hour of the race. So you may see them brought back before the typical time that a two-man group is reeled in. Status quo at the front of the peloton, Radio Shack Nissan, Argos Shimano, and a few other teams chipping in to help out with the workload. Again, no categorized climbs along the way today. Final 5K rather interesting, though. It's kind of up and down before it goes uphill all the way to the finish in the final 2 kilometers. They have a wide right-hand loop that they make into the final K, which is then straight to the finish, and again all uphill. So we'll wait and see exactly what kind of finish that sets us up for. If one of the pure sprinters can still be the fastest to the line, or if an uphill specialist like Philippe Gilbert may get in the mix. If some guy who no one is thinking of perhaps can get a break in the final couple kilometers and just get off the front of the field long enough.
And Steve Cummings, number 44 here, picking up a beautiful win a few days ago for Team BMC, picking up the stage number 13. That was that team's 8th win of the month. Gilbert got their 7th win of the month, so it was a very good August for Team BMC, the squad out of America, sponsored by the Swiss Bicycle Manufacturing Company.
Now the gap down to just about 12 seconds, so it's imminent. Starting to look back with about 31 kilometers left to go. Anytime the helicopter pulls the camera back, you know that it's just about game over. 2 leaders at the top of the screen and the field coming into view at the bottom. So, we're still over 30K left. You wonder what kind of counterattacks we may see the rest of the way. And with that uphill finish, can't say it enough that that opens up so many other possibilities for the way the stage may finish. Not just a field sprint, but guys sensing they may have a real chance at a stage win may try to attack, get just enough of a gap to hold off the field on the uphill at the line.
One camera there with both views, the field in the rearview mirror, the 2 breakaway men. Little congratulatory handshake, very brief. Irizar continuing to ride tempo on the front, and definitely this is a day that's very hard to predict. From here to the finish, we know that the 2 men are going to get caught The question is, what's going to happen? Is anybody going to be able to take advantage of the twisty approach to the finish and the up and down nature and actually get clear before the sprint?
Now remember what happened on stage number 9 when Philippe Gilbert won. He attacked late. Joaquim Rodriguez went with him, and those two stayed clear all the way to the line. And that was another uphill finish.
Indeed, and bigger climbs there at the end of that day. But still, to see the guy in the overall leader's jersey, Joaquim Rodriguez, ride away, amazing.
Here goes Aitor Galdos of Caja Rural making the acceleration as they were about to be caught. And right on his wheel, his partner Jose Vicente Toribio. 30K remaining, stage 19. They established this breakaway in the first kilometer of today's stage that's over 180K long. And it looks like they are about to be scooped up just inside the final 30K of the stage. Pace really picking up now that the catch is about to happen.
Notice that Rodriguez has a teammate bringing him up to the front. Rodriguez in the green jersey is the points leader now. We're not used to seeing him in that color.
That was in red for 2 weeks of the competition. And among active riders in the professional peloton, Joaquim Rodriguez now has the second most wins at the Vuelta a Espana in terms of individual stage victories, only behind Alessandro Pataki.
There's a big divide there, however.
Oh, yeah. Pataki over 20, but he's a pure sprinter, so it's not surprising to see him rack up victories like that. But for Rodriguez, 3 alone in this race, 7 for his career, wins different types of stages, so still very impressive. And here they come. The bank has called in the loan. Oh, but for one more moment, Toribio is going to try to hang out front. Where is this sprint going? I mean, really.
You can see the Radio Shack men looking over like, are you serious? Really?
You've done your job. You have the promotional value for your team already well established for the day. You can pull the plug. 28K left.
And certainly we always think about the potential for counterattacks when a breakaway is brought back. On today's stage, I wonder if it's still so far out that nobody's going to go for it, unless they think the peloton is just going to kind of be sleepy and let them go. I think we may see a while transpire here with just general positioning before anything really gets hot.
So the field here not exactly crushing it as they come by our 2 leaders, gobble them up, and now everybody back together for the final 27.5 kilometers. This is the front of the stage. Radio Shack Nissan helping to set the pace here as the break that's been out there all day long finally back within the field. Now with the pace quickening on some of these wide, flat, and exposed roads, it does take you back to stage number 4 when we had that crash with Alejandro Valverde, at that time the race leader, just behind the front of the field. It was windier today than what we've seen so far on this stage 19, but crashes can happen for a variety of reasons, not just the wind.
It is definitely looking like a very straightforward run-in at this point. But as you mentioned, things can change very quickly. As soon as the tension gets ratcheted up a little bit, and now it's Saxo Bank on the front, things start to happen. Guys start fighting for position. You see all the bottles getting jettisoned out of the peloton as guys get rid of unwanted weight and get ready to start to go to battle here in the final 20 kilometers of the race.
Almost 60K per hour. First few hours were extremely slow. Average pace almost 10 miles per hour slower than yesterday, which was the longest stage of this year's Vuelta.
And 10 miles per hour slower average is significant. A couple miles an hour average is a fairly big difference. So when you go 10 miles an hour slower, it really shows how much it was turned off today. But it's starting to switch on now.
Weather has certainly improved from the brief showers we had earlier and much darker skies. Now, partly sunny, but it does not look like rain will be a threat the rest of the way. And the peloton really stretched out now because of the pace at the front. Rabobank has brought some guys forward in the orange and blue with 20K left to go. How about Matty Bruschel for the uphill finish today from Rabobank?
Maybe we're finally going to see him. I mean, he has been very hard to pick out in this bike race up until now. So far in the previous 18 days of racing, we have not seen much of him, but it is a type of finish that he could succeed on. He was good at the Geelong World Championships in Australia. Uphill finish, not as long as an uphill as this one, but still, he is good on an uphill finish.
Now, the Royal Palace of Rio Frio, at one time used by the Bourbon royal family as a hunting pavilion as well as a vacation house. Not bad when that's your hunting shack. The point of departure for a little hunting adventure.
You know,
I'll take it.
I've never been much for hunting, but I'll go hang out, no problem.
Come back, start the fire, and cook up the day's catch.
So we just noticed the guys going over a railroad track that was fairly bumpy. And those are the little things that can happen all of a sudden that the guys have to navigate that can change the complexion of the race. It was narrow, bumpy. If you get a guy who punctures, crashes, takes down a bunch of guys, changes everything.
Today's stage heading south most of the way before looping back up north right at the very end to the town of La Lastria. But getting
speed
closer
bumps as well.
Yeah, getting closer to the Spanish capital of Madrid, where the race has its traditional endpoint on Sunday.
Hey, speaking of railroad tracks, the same Tour de Pont, Steve Bauer was in the time trial, full on. He goes over the railroad tracks, double puncture, blows out his front and rear tires on TV, washes out his front end, and stacks it in a straight line.
You don't often see the double puncture.
No, it's like bam, bam. It sounded like a double fault in a track and field start or something.
Another speed bump right there. A lot of times, especially in the urban city centers, we see riders who are very mindful of tram tracks or some kind of railroad tracks and speed bumps, and we've been using protests because of courses that go over terrain like that.
Yeah, especially the Giro d'Italia a few seasons ago when the guy said, look, this is insane. There are diagonal tram tracks through the corners. Really?
That's what you get, especially in old historical city centers. You get tram tracks and cobblestones and all kinds of pavement or geography that a lot of times isn't all that conducive to racing, but that's not what they built those streets for in the first place.
Good point.
17K left to go. This is the front of the race. Two-man breakaway. Caught a few kilometers ago. Pace picking up. Now it looks like Movistar with the green helmets coming to the front. The team of Alejandro Valverde, who is second on the GC. Movistar at the front of the race right now, along with Saxo Bank. 15K remaining. Now with Movistar now up there really for the first time today. It highlights the chances of Alejandro Valverde, who's in a white jersey, to potentially win what would be his third stage of this year's race. And now we have a split. A small split off the front. And this is now the peloton. So the first time we've seen these pictures, what's happened to the field.
So this is the front of the peloton here. And there is definitely a split. I'm looking back there, looking for who has missed out.
Contador is there.
Looks like Contador is there, and I think I see the green jersey of Perito Rodriguez as well.
Looks like Valverde was there too. I thought I saw the white jersey. Yeah, he's there as well. So he's just in front of Contador. Rabobank riders are all still there in the orange and blue. But interesting to see this split. And now the pace up at the mid-70s in terms of kilometers per hour.
That's well over 40 miles an hour. And just when you thought things were going to kind of be mellow most of the way into the finish, to see a split right there, very surprising.
Well, to this point, hasn't been particularly windy out there. And the pace just in the last 10K or so is really picked up to where it is right now. It had been very pedestrian most of the way. So the second group now that has been split from the first. So things fracturing in the final 15K of stage 19. It looks like most of our GC riders are in the front group. So
yeah, and how incredibly strange that was to see a split right there. It'd be very interesting to see what the gap is. So all the GC men did make the front group. It's a large group.
Yeah, this is an extremely large group.
So even the first group was a very large group. In fact, I originally thought it was the second group. It was so big when we saw the front of it. But now things completely strung out single file back here. All of a sudden, just like that, the race dynamic changes.
All right, so this is back to the front of the race. Group number one, Joaquim Rodriguez in the green jersey going with this acceleration with the Rabobank riders, and Alejandro Valverde is right on his wheel.
Well, so it is definitely happening here with 12K to go.
Alberto Contador still at the front of the group with his Saxo Bank teammates. And that's the intermediate sprint right there that they moved from earlier. So both Valverde and Rodriguez are going to get a time bonus for being in the first three.
And they told us that sprint was with 5K to go, so who knows?
Yeah, they definitely moved the sprint, and that's not where it was supposed to be, but obviously those three sprinting for the time bonuses.
Well, and Valverde is in a very precarious situation because he has a small lead over Rodriguez, just a little over 30 seconds. There's the red jersey of Alberto Contador. So he was not partaking in that intermediate sprint, but he's got more of a cushion.
So it looked like Heysink, Valverde, and Rodriguez were those first three riders, 6, 4, and 2 seconds available in bonus time at the intermediate sprint. And now they pull back, and everyone is together once again at the front of the race. Contador in the red jersey, Rodriguez in the green just behind him, and Valverde in the white is just ahead of Contador.
Well, apparently they all got the memo that the intermediate sprint was where it was, because they certainly were going for it. And there's your train. You've been looking for that.
We've been waiting for it. All of the other various modes of transportation we've seen today, from the helicopter, the horses, the motorbikes, the bicycles themselves, the kids on bikes. And now we finally get the train in the final 11K. Movistar at the front, Saxo Bank up there as well. Alejandro Valverde in that white jersey. Don't count him out for the stage win today.
No, he is definitely a man who has a shot at it, and he's looking for every little opportunity he can get, not only to win a stage, it'd be nice to get another stage win, but also to get a time bonus and give him more of a cushion for stage 20 tomorrow. Stage 20 tomorrow, a lot can happen on the Bola del Mundo.
20 seconds between two large groups with 10K left to go. All of the GC riders in this front group. Commercial free, brought to you by Strava. All the way to the finish of stage number 19. Two-man breakaway earlier in the stage. No threat on the GC. They were caught. Just under 30K left from the finish. As you see, Valverde got the top bonus time at the intermediate sprint a moment ago. Rodriguez got second, so Valverde picking up 6 seconds, Rodriguez 4, with Heysink 2.
Pretty amazing that this group is still split in half.
Now Valverde riding third wheel behind two of his teammates. So under 10K remaining to an uphill finish in La Lastria.
Fairly straightforward final kilometer as it goes uphill. They do wind around a traffic circle, but with the uphill, it shouldn't be that big of a factor in the sprint. It should just be timing and who's got the right horsepower at the end.
Now Movistar right now has the horsepower with 9K left to go. Pacing Valverde at the front of the field. Now the way things are unfolding here, this is certainly still a battle in the top 3 of the general classification, because Rodriguez, who's now sitting in 3rd behind Valverde, positioned in 2nd, still has a distinct possibility of moving back up, at least into 2nd, by the end of the race on Sunday in Madrid. And both Rodriguez and Valverde were going for time at the intermediate sprint a moment ago, so with an uphill finish coming up here at the end of today's stage, we may see another battle between those two unfold.
Yeah, and Rodriguez's director, Valerio Piva, was very clear with me yesterday that he was going to try and win the Bola del Mundo and move back at least into 2nd place in the classification.
Very interesting split in the field coming here in the final 20K.
Oh, the hand sling.
It's like a track race.
Not really allowed to do that. And caught on the camera with the helicopter.
Wasn't too obvious, was it? 8K left to go. Now Katusha at the front, taking over from Movistar.
Well, they're obviously scrambling, trying to get across to this front group and to Orica Green Edge men. And I didn't see which ones they were, but one doing a big pull and then trying to sling his teammate and hope that he could get the rest of the way across.
This is the front of the bike race again. Joaquim Rodriguez in a green jersey, just a few wheels back. So is Alejandro Valverde, who's in white. 7.5K from the finish. And again, the final 5K, kind of up and down before it goes uphill in the last 2 kilometers to the line.
We've got a bunch of corners here coming in as well. Not only in the next couple of K, but all the way into the finish, except for that final kilometer.
Now look at this speed. They are flying along. This is as fast as they have gone all day. Now it's 7K remaining.
So Rodriguez has to think that he's got a decent shot at winning the stage also. So in addition to Alejandro Valverde, who's 2nd on the GC, and Joaquim Rodriguez, who's 3rd, they're also going to be fighting with guys who are not in the GC that think they have a shot. A guy like Philippe Gilbert, a guy like Gianni Meersman, Alan Davis possibly, but Davis may have missed the split. He's the Orica guy, and I wonder if that was him that was just getting the hand sling.
Now there's less than 10 seconds between the two groups on the road, with almost half a dozen kilometers left to go. Alberto Contador came into the day leading Alejandro Valverde by 1 minute 52 seconds, leading Joaquim Rodriguez by 2:28.
More just absolutely stunning scenery at this year's Vuelta.
Now the Alcazar, one of the oldest castles in the region, back from the 12th century. The riders not even looking up because it is fast and furious at the front.
No, but I'll take another look. Unbelievable.
So straight out of the pages of Disney World. Cinderella's castle. 5.5K to go, and the gap has actually gone up between the two groups.
Well, Katusha absolutely putting everything into it on the front right now. They must have a good feeling about this finish for Rodriguez. Remember, Rodriguez has been virtually untouchable on the uphill finishes in this year's race.
And a BMC rider receiving some mechanical service at the back. Mauro Santambrogio. And at the front of the race, Katusha continuing to set the heavy tempo with 5K remaining. So this is where the road gets a little tricky, up and down the rest of the way. Now riders sort of taking stock as to where things stand at the front. Katusha pulling off, but the speed not really slowing down all that much, and still 11 seconds from this group back to that second group on the road. Contador in the red jersey moving up. He's just a couple of wheels behind Alejandro Valverde in the white jersey. Joaquim Rodriguez behind both of them in the green.
And things definitely getting pretty interesting right now, as the general classification men have to be on hyper alert. When it's going this hard, there's definitely an opportunity for a little gap to open up and one of your rivals to get away from you.
So no single rider has attacked from the front of this group yet. But we're about 2K away from it going uphill all the way to the finish. La Lastria hosting a Vuelta stage finish for the first time in its history.
So they are actually trending uphill right now, and it will, just before it gets to 3K, it'll start to go down a little bit and then start picking back up again at the end.
These riders will be aware of how the road undulates the rest of the way, so maybe just waiting, picking their spots where to launch what they hope will be a decisive attack in the final 4K. Now we have a rider making a move off the front.
It looks like a Cofidis rider.
Indeed it is. How much of a gap will he get? Katusha coming back to the front. It looks like Team Sky and Movistar are both up there, as is Rabobank. And it doesn't look like this is going to go anywhere.
No, it certainly doesn't. But you never know. Sometimes one guy trickles off and then a few more. And in fact, now a few more guys are trickling off the front of the group there. It looks like 4, maybe 5 more guys trying to make their way up. Once you get a group, that can change the dynamic significantly.
Yeah, that definitely changes things, as opposed to just one guy dangling off the front.
Rough asphalt, still uphill. Okay, now they're going to get the little bit of a downhill here as they get around this corner. So pretty tricky little finale.
Now that is the aqueduct that La Lastria is known for, a signature landmark in the finishing town. And a big left-hand turn taking them to the downhill with 3K left to go in the stage.
Or one man still holding on by himself. The other guy scrambling to try and get organized and bring him back. And then the question is, how many seconds is it back to the peloton? Do these guys have a legitimate shot?
And that is Egoitz Garcia. First move from him in this entire race. And the chase to bring him back.
He's using the freshness factor.
We have 5 guys just behind him now, coming off the front of the field.
A Katusha man, a Sky man in the chase.
And the road about to go back uphill the rest of the way to the finish in the final 2 kilometers. They're getting a gap here.
This is a very legitimate shot at somebody pulling a stage win out.
Now, by itself, that move from Garcia probably wouldn't have gone anywhere, but now that these other riders have gone off the front of the field, it changes the dynamics, and we have 6 riders at the front with a couple of K left.
So we've got Katusha, we've got Argos, and actually, is that Degenkolb?
Yes, it is. John Degenkolb at the front in the white, number 191, as the Rabobank rider attacks. Sky responds at the front. Now an AG2R rider up there, and Degenkolb at the very back here in the white with the green trim.
Very interesting to see Degenkolb getting some daylight over the peloton here. That's a guy you would not have expected them to let go. Balan on the front.
That's Garcia from Cofidis, who was in that group. In fact, he made the initial move. He's been caught, and now we're down to these 4 out front.
So other than Degenkolb,
that's Matty Breschel.
Breschel, that's another man we were saying had a decent shot at it. I still haven't picked out the Sky man or the AG2R rider in the lead.
But there's Philippe Gilbert. He wants to bring this group back. That is Juan Antonio Flecha for Team Sky and Nicholas Roach.
Okay, well that's a quality group of 4 right there. There's no doubt about it.
They're calling it Matteo Monteguti for AG2R, so it may be Monteguti and not Roach in that group. And there he goes.
I think it's Roach.
Graphically, they put up Monteguti. We'll wait and see. We'll get the official confirmation, but there's still 1K now left to go.
Look
And
at that.
it is Nicholas Roach. It was a bad graphic, so here's Roach, but the field just behind now.
And just 1K to go. He is trying to hold on to this. Look at behind. That is Degenkolb, and he's got Fletcher on his wheel.
So coming down inside the final kilometer of stage 19, Nicholas Roach in 12th position on the GC and about to be caught.
And look at that, Degenkolb has gone across, he got rid of Fletcher. Is Degenkolb gonna have the legs? But here comes Gilbert.
Philippe Gilbert in 3rd position in the yellow helmet on the road.
And look who's on Gilbert's wheel, it's the man, the sprinter Swift for Sky.
And Rodriguez is passing Contador. Half a kilometer left to go. After almost 5 hours on the bike, Gilbert has moved to the front with Swift right on his wheel.
And he's had to go very long, Gilbert has, to bring back the 2 leaders. Swift is in the perfect spot, but he looks like he's getting gapped.
Philippe Gilbert trying to hang on from distance to win his 2nd stage of the Vuelta. 200 meters to the line. Philippe Gilbert, after winning stage number 9, is going to pull away to a victory in stage 19 as well.
An impressive ride by Gilbert, but here comes Valverde too late.
Gilbert gets the stage win. Valverde takes 2nd. Joaquim Rodriguez just misses a time bonus in 4th.
That was a supreme effort by BMC's Philippe Gilbert. He went long, he had Swift on his wheel, and literally rode him off his wheel for his 2nd stage win.
I think that man, after suffering all season long, is finally ready for the upcoming World Championships. He gets his 2nd win at this year's Vuelta. Philippe Gilbert had to attack from a long way out in an uphill sprint to win his 2nd stage of this year's race.
And what's truly unbelievable to me is Ben Swift was right on his wheel in the draft and eventually just succumbed to the pressure that Gilbert continued to put on. And right here, he popped and he got dropped.
And nobody can finish off a stage when it goes uphill like this at the end the way Philippe Gilbert can when he's at his best. Hasn't always been that way over the course of this season, but boy, today he showed his strength and talked about it after the win.
Yeah, this is typical for a finish like this. You have to give everything, and it's you have a lot of lactate in the muscles, and you just have to go and try to just not sit down, because if you sit down, it's over. So you have to stay on the pedal as fast as you can.
Was most beautiful this one than the one of Montjuic, right?
Yeah, but you know, all the wins are nice. Professionally, it's always hard to win. But I thank my team BMC because they did a great job today, especially Klaas Ludwig and Alessandro Ballan. They did great today. And when you see this, you know, when you have a big talent like Ballan riding for you, for yourself, it gave me like an extra motivation, because he can win himself, and when he gave the chance like this to me, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you.
Here's the way things stand. Alberto Contador still the overall leader by a pretty comfortable margin. Valverde 135 back, and Joaquim Rodriguez still in 3rd. 2:21 off the pace.
So Valverde picking up some crucial seconds at the finish line and the intermediate time bonus sprint to pad his lead over Rodriguez.
Oh, and now here we are, stage number 20, the penultimate day of the race, and it is raining at the summit finish. Hi everyone, Steve Schlanger with Todd Gagulski. Here is the GC coming in. Contador, Valverde, Rodriguez. The top 3 separated by 2:21, but it will all be sorted out once and for all here today.
An absolutely brutal day in the mountains awaits here for these guys on stage number 20. And this is the day, Steve, that they've been waiting for or fearing for the last 3 weeks. A vicious day with over 13,000 feet of climbing, big climbs all day long, culminating ultimately with the Bola del Mundo, over 20% grade at the top. Many, including the overall leader, Alberto Contador, call this the toughest day of the entire race, 23% maximum in the final kilometers.
It's been a very mountainous race to this point, and now one final day in the big mountains of Spain as we pick up the action live on a rainy Saturday. we have a 20-rider breakaway that is just inside of 7 minutes ahead of the main field. They have about 55 kilometers left to go, and that means they are on the second to last climb of the stage, the Puerto de Cotos, that will summit with 50K left to go on this 170.7 kilometer stage.
And this climb not particularly brutal. It's more of a softening up climb for the guys as they're well into the bike race, and one nasty climb to go. But one of the things that's also going to serve to soften the riders up and make the final climb less predictable is the rain and the crazy weather today.
Our large group had a lead of almost 11 minutes at one point, so it's come down considerably, over 4 minutes since its largest margin, as we run through some of the names in the breakaway today, and it includes 2 former Vuelta a Espana winners in Dennis Menshaw, as well as last year's winner, J.J. Cobo.
Yeah, Cobo has been fairly anonymous most of this race, and boy, he would certainly like to get a big win on the top of the Bola del Mundo, but they got a lot of racing between where they are now and the final summit finish of this year's Vuelta.
Our leaders on the left, the field on the right, and for the leaders, they are on the steepest part of the climb where it hits 7%. This 14K climb averages just about 5%, but they will hit this 7% stretch on 2 different occasions where they are now and just 2K from the summit, which once again is at 50K left to go in the stage. And a couple of riders now coming off the back.
Could see Klaus Lodewijk for BMC, and it was Gert Stigmans there for the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team, getting their tickets punched summarily off the back. Number 98 there, the blue helmet on the left side. That is Tom Peterson, the American on the Garmin Sharp team. Nice to see him making the move today.
Going into the Spanish capital of Madrid, it's more ceremonial than anything. Nothing will really change hands. So it all comes down to today. And before Alberto Contador had the overall lead, he said he couldn't chance it. He couldn't wait to go to battle with that man in the green jersey, Joaquim Rodriguez, on this final summit finish. It would leave too much to chance. So he attacked earlier. But now for Rodriguez, he has no choice. It all comes down to today for him. So can he do anything to take that red jersey back? Does he have any shot of winning this Vuelta?
It's a huge ask, and even when I spoke with his director the last couple of days, he said Rodriguez is definitely going to try and win the stage, and he's definitely going to try and get past Valverde and move back up into second. But to win, it would take Contador and Valverde both to have off days, and the chances of that are pretty slim, really.
2 years ago, first time up the Bola del Mundo, Rodriguez was third on the stage. For what it's worth, but different circumstances, wasn't as much of a player for the general classification that day. As we're back to the front of the field here, with Euskaltel still riding at the front.
Well, and Igor Anton now just going out of the left side of your screen, third from the back of the men in orange. He did say on the start line today that he was up for it. It was the last occasion to win a stage, and he's got his team up there doing a great job for Alberto Contador's team right now. Just giving those guys the free ride, and all it means to me is the fireworks will be that much hotter on the final climb.
Contador sitting there in the red jersey, just a couple of wheels behind Alejandro Valverde in a white jersey once again. He's second on the GC. And a few wheels back, we also saw in the green jersey once again Joaquim Rodriguez, who's looking pretty good to hang on to that green jersey and win the points competition at this year's race.
J.J. Cobo on the left, the former winner from last year. Richie Porte now rolling through. And this is Kevin de Vert. Excuse me, it is not. It's Kesiakov coming through there.
Winner of the time trial.
Yeah, great ride by him there. Bouet, the AG2R man on the front, as we've already pointed him out, the highest place in the general classification. Peterson, the Garmin Sharp rider. So all these guys continuing to ride through here together, but it is starting to be just whittled down a little bit. This is actually Seal Dreyers. This is not Kesiakov. His teammate Kesiakov also in the move.
So 51K to go in the stage. They are 1K from the summit of this Category 1 climb, the Puerto de Cotos. Never less than 6% in the last 4K of the climb. And given the fact that It is the third Category 1 climb of the day so far. That 6% probably feels like it's a little steeper than that.
Yeah, indeed. And you can see the big effort being made by Seal Dreyers on the front. Presumably that is to help his teammate and team leader, Kesiakov, try and stay away and get a stage win here.
Euskaltel in the orange and black, one of 12 teams yet to win a stage in this year's race. 10 teams have already won at least one stage, but Euskaltel is one of those that has missed out to this point. And obviously in their home Grand Tour in Spain, they would like to at least bag one stage before going home, considering the fact that they were never really in the GC picture.
It's going to be a tough one to win because we have to assume that the battle between Rodriguez, Contador, and Valverde is going to be extreme at the top. So to get away from them at the end of the race is something that's going to require a lot of guts today. Antone out of the saddle there, chewing, keeping the calories going into the system.
Now the weather for the second consecutive day, rather suspect. It's been raining, sun has come out at various times, so you've gone into rain, then sun, partly cloudy, a little bit of wind, temperatures are cooler. In the first 2.5 weeks, it was just bright sunshine, barely a cloud in the sky, hot temperatures, routinely over 100 degrees, but these last 2 days have really provided the first couple of days of precipitation we've seen at this year's Vuelta.
Alessandro Ballan in the red and black just out of the screen, doing a phenomenal job chasing down the leaders yesterday, very late in the race to set up his teammate Philippe Gilbert for his second stage win of the race. And by the way, it's his second win of the season, and his first one was in the race earlier on, and Philippe was also aided by Ballan there.
Large leading group coming to the summit of the Category 1 climb.
Seal Dreyers doing a big job coming up the right side there in the green with the yellow helmet. That's David de la Fuente. And seeing Denis Menchov back there, the other former winner of the Vuelta in this group, along with Juan Jose Cobo.
So who wants to race for the mountain points here?
Well, looks like Bouet and de la Fuente have the most interest.
Should be coming under the banner here shortly. Simon Clark, who's been in the break today, leader of the King of the Mountains competition, has typically been the first man over the climb so far on stage 20, but not here.
And he doesn't have to be here because he has sewn up the mountains classification by leading over the previous climbs today. So it'll be Orica Greenedge's first overall jersey in a Grand Tour.
All right, so 4 climbs down, 1 to go, but it is the biggest. The Beyond classification, Bola del Mundo at the end of stage 20. Our large leading group now on the descent of the Puerto de Cotos Category 1 climb. Under 50K left to go on stage 20 of the Vuelta. Peloton still over 6.5 minutes back. They are still going uphill.
Has decided to roll on out of the front of the breakaway. Remember, he does have his teammate Kesiakov back in the group behind, but he has decided it's time to strike out on his own here.
So the first individual move from that large breakaway, coming on the descent of the Category 1 Puerto de Cotos, with 45 kilometers left to go in the stage. Now at this point, it would typically be a fine day's work. They've gone over 3 Category 1 climbs, a Cat 2, so 4 climbs in the rearview mirror. Typically, it's not a bad day at the office, but that's not all on stage 20 with the Beyond classification, Bola del Mundo still looming on the horizon.
And I think depending on how you measure it, most guys will look back and say it was a bad day in the office today as the Peloton going over the summit just about 650 behind the breakaway group.
Nice crowd at the summit of this climb, but there will be many more at the summit of the next one. As Seal Dreyers soldiers on off the front of the breakaway group, but not getting much time, it doesn't look like.
Denis Menchov on the left there, right behind Eros Kopecky for Liquigas.
Now finishing on the Bola del Mundo for the second time in Vuelta history, but today's stage 20 starting for the first time ever at a golf course of all places. They started just in front of the clubhouse of a golf course north of where they are right now. Par 71, in case you're wondering.
I was.
And now heading south in a very interesting route because they've gone multiple directions today. Southwest, northeast, north, east, and they will finish with an easterly direction to the Bola del Mundo itself, which is just north of Madrid, the finishing town for the Vuelta overall, tomorrow on stage 21.
As the crow flies, the start and finish very close together on today's stage, but the way they picked the route, they have gone through, as you said, already 4 major mountains, and they got one, the nastiest of all, maybe the nastiest of the entire race left to go.
All right, so Sildraers has been brought back. This is an intermediate sprint coming up, the first of the 2 on the day. Off the descent of the Category 1 climb and the intermediate sprint coming with 43K left to go in the stage. They'll have one more intermediate sprint with 31K remaining.
These intermediate sprints look to mean absolutely nothing in today's race because those small time bonuses will not change anything for this breakaway group, and there's nobody in this group that's really fighting for those sprint jersey points.
Big crowd here, as the big breakaway group is now back together with still a lead of over 6 minutes on the main field and 1 climb still to go. Our leaders 6.5 minutes ahead of the field, 40K left to go on stage number 20. They have gone over 4 climbs through 1 intermediate sprint. Still 1 sprint point to go and 1 final climb left on the menu for today's second to last day of the season's final Grand Tour.
See these roads still wet as there's been intermittent rain. David de la Fuente there at the back, right in front of him, Menchov opening up just a little bit of a gap. And you know, when we look at this group, the composition of this breakaway group, there's some guys in here who are big names in the sport that have been dedicated to their team leaders, and they may really be relishing the chance to sneak away for a stage win, Denis Menchov being one of them here at the back. Of course, their #1 objective will be to look for their team leader coming up from behind, so Menchov will try to help Rodriguez if he can on the final climb.
That is the finish on top of the Bola del Mundo, the rocket-shaped antennas that they have up there for radio and TV communications. It was raining earlier, but the sun has now come out, and you can kind of see how the road snakes up this very open, barren landscape to a climb that they're using for only the 2nd time in Vuelta history. It's a narrow concrete service road up to a ski station north of Madrid. And it's taken quite a while for them to decide on using the Bola del Mundo on a regular basis at the Vuelta, even though they've had the opportunity to use it on several occasions in the past. But now, considering the reception it got 2 years ago, they're intent on making it a regular venue for a Vuelta summit finish.
I think they should, personally, and especially with the new technology of the compact crankset where they can put a smaller chainring on the front and give the guys a better shot of making it up the climb without actually having to get off their bikes.
And it just has the sound, the name of a classic type of climb, Bola del Mundo. Sounds like the Ventoux or the Alpe d'Huez or Anglerou, the Zoncolat. They all have that sound to them that have the feel of an iconic climb. So if for no other reason, make that a regular climb in the race.
That's a fantastic climb, and Alberto Contador, for instance, he uses this special rear derailleur that is made by Y-Fly, which actually has a longer cage on the rear derailleur so that it can handle a wider range of cogs in the back, and it's very helpful on a day like this.
Euskaltel, unrelenting at the front in the orange and black, just smothering the head of this peloton, working to bring back the breakaway. Finally win a stage that's been so elusive for them at this year's race.
I'll be very curious to see the latest time split because it has not been coming down very fast at all. Look at this, approaching 6 minutes, so not much change once again.
2 years ago, as I noted, we also had a 20-rider breakaway going up to the Bola del Mundo, same as we have today. That breakaway did not survive. It came down to a GC battle between the top men at the head of the leaderboard. So given where we are right now, 35K to go, the lead over 6 minutes here, any chance for this breakaway to make it?
Absolutely, there's a chance for this breakaway to make it, and we're going to continue to keep a close eye on the front of the peloton and see how much time these guys hold on to going into the final climb. It's 11.4 kilometers. I think if they get into the bottom of that climb with a few minutes, I think they have a legitimate shot of producing the winner.
Feed zone here. And a lot of the TV trucks and some of the promotional vehicles are parked here as well. They can't get those up to the very top and the finish line at the Bola del Mundo, so they have to have a staging area, and it looks like this is it. With 34K to go.
Right down at the bottom of the climb. They actually did the podium presentations down here last year. They'll do them again this year, I'm sure, because there's just no room at the top.
Ian Stannard in the white jersey is the British National Road Champion at the very back of the peloton. Interesting, riding for Team Sky, despite the fact that they've been in the mix for both sprints and the GC with Ben Swift and Chris Froome. Sky is one of those teams that's yet to win a stage at this year's Vuelta.
And certainly they want to win one. Chris Froome, before the day started, saying today is for the Colombians. Rigoberto Urán, Sergio Henao. He's hoping one of them can get a stage win, and if not, they're hoping they can get one tomorrow with Ben Swift. Swift has been close on occasion. A flat stage tomorrow, much more to his liking for a sprint than yesterday's, where he could not stay on the wheel of Philippe Gilbert.
So 33K left to go in the stage, just about 20K remaining before they start the final climb of this year's Vuelta.
That's fast.
Rolling along at over 90 kilometers per hour. Just going through the second of the two intermediate sprints. You were looking down on the front end of the main field. Euskaltel in the orange and black. Still setting the tempo. In front of Saxo Bank, the team of overall leader Alberto Contador.
And just moments ago, we saw the speedometer of the motorcycle following the peloton at 107 kilometers an hour. That's about 66 miles an hour as they were ripping a descent.
Big Saturday in Spain, with the final summit finish of this year's Vuelta a Espana. 30K to go for our large leading group, still hanging on to a lead of over 6 minutes on the main field. But inching closer to the Bola del Mundo, the final of the 5 climbs on the profile today. At the very end of this stage, after 3 Category 1s and 1 Cat 2 have already been conquered.
Huge day in the legs for these guys, 20 days into the race. So there's a lot of that cumulative fatigue, and right now hovering close to 60 miles an hour again there momentarily as these guys continue to lead the charge for their team leader Igor Anton of the Euskaltel squad.
What's it like, Gogo, to be on a bike, on a descent, with other guys around you, flying along at over 60 miles per hour, knowing that even the slightest mistake can cause havoc?
I think the bigger worry for these guys is all the spectators. And is somebody going to do a bonehead thing out there, let a dog go, try and get a photograph, something like that? For the most part, the riders, you know, they're so good at what they do that they're not too worried about each other.
The gap has kind of leveled off here in that 6-minute range since it was at its largest point much earlier, over 11 minutes.
One thing you can add to what it's like on a descent, Steve, is notice how everybody, first of all, they just pointed out that they have a right-hand turn. You saw that. Several guys up at the front pointing for people behind to see. But they also give each other more room. They're not 4, 5, 6 inches away from each other. They're half a bike length. So they give themselves some reaction space.
They are very good at bike handling and all that, but aren't you at all ever worried about that one guy who's in his first Grand Tour, somebody who's just a little less adept at handling the bike? Because, like I said, all it takes is a slight mistake, not even a major one.
Oh, for sure you are. And what you end up doing is you look around you. And when you see the guy in front of you that you don't trust, you get in front of him. It happens all the time. If there's a guy that you consider to be sketchy, you stay away.
Under 30K to go, that final climb, 11.5 kilometers long. So still a ways away.
Another man we haven't seen a lot of, Tiago Machado for Radio Shack, just rolling through on the right there. Well down in the general classification. A great rider, however. And that was Ignatiev being brought back from the breakaway group. So Euskaltel continuing on. Ignatiev, one of a few guys who have been popped out of the break so far.
How many times do we see this, though? A team like Euskaltel riding at the front for so long with a big summit finish at the end of the stage, and then they're nowhere to be found when the battle unfolds to win the stage.
You see it all the time, and in fact, a day like today may be a perfect example of that happening, because the breakaway still has such a large gap, and the only way Antone can get a stage win is they have to bring that breakaway back first. And so they're having a hard time bringing it back, which means he's going to have no help on the climb because his teammates are all going to be burned out. And he's going to be going to battle with Rodriguez, Contador, Valverde, and anybody else who's going for a stage win.
And he's not getting help from the Saxo Bank team of our race leader, Alberto Contador, because there's nobody of a GC threat in that breakaway group, so no need for them to work at reeling him in.
Yeah, that's right. And Alberto's fine with some guys taking the time bonus, and that way, if he falters, he has less to worry about with Rodriguez and Valverde. Alberto wants to win the stage, don't get me wrong, but this is not a bad situation for him.
All right, so the peloton coming through that second intermediate sprint and still over 6 minutes behind our leaders, with 26 kilometers left to go on the final mountainous day at this year's Vuelta a Espana. Leading group over 60K an hour, 24K left in the stage, and the lead over the peloton has now come down under 6 minutes, 5:43. As Sealdreris puts in another acceleration from what is still a pretty big group at the front of the race. They lost a few along the way, but still a healthy number of riders up the road here on stage 20.
A lot of horsepower in this group that has been proven to be very tough for Euskaltel to bring back. Still a large gap to these guys, and definitely looking like they do have a shot at a stage win, so things may become a little bit less, well, let's just say cooperative at the front here.
The thing that makes it so difficult for the breakaway is the fact that it is so steep on the upper slopes of the final climb. 23% right near the top. Guys almost standing still. We saw it the other day on a climb that was over 23% near the top. Riders moving sideways, almost getting off their bikes in some cases. It was at a virtual standstill because that's all you can really do. When it gets that steep, it's hard to ride, isn't it?
It's incredibly hard to ride, and if it's wet, which it could very well be, if you slip your rear wheel out, you lose your momentum immediately, and often you can't keep going. So guys have to be very well balanced on their bikes in terms of their forward and backward weight. If they're back too far to keep the back tire traction, the front wheel comes off the ground. If you're out of the saddle trying to make the power over the handlebars, you spin out the rear wheel.
That's why a stage like today can be counterintuitive. You would think, okay, big summit finish at the end, really steep roads, great day to attack and really put in a lot of time on a GC rival. But because it is so steep, it's hard to attack. Sometimes all you can do is just hang on.
Yeah, it almost becomes just a survival to the top. And one thing that Alberto did on the Quito Negro was to ride a very small gear and spin his way up, and that actually is very helpful if it's wet on a day like today.
The Basque-based Euskaltel team at the front of the field and starting to finally whittle away at the lead for our front group. Have them down under 6 minutes.
So Alberto riding a 36-tooth front chainring and a 32 rear sprocket on the Quito Negro. That's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. You rarely see guys in professional cycling riding gears like that. In fact, Lawrence ten Dam said he used for the first time in his career a compact crank, which allows that smaller chainring. And he said he was happy he had it, but not happy the climb was in the bike race. He thought it was too much.
And a lot of these riders have different opinions on whether or not climbs like the Quito Negro or the Bolo del Mundo should even be included in a Grand Tour. Some say, yes, it makes it spectacular. The fans love it. It provides a dramatic finish to the end of a stage. And others say it's just so difficult that it's beyond reason.
And I can see both arguments, honestly. I mean, when the Angleroo was first brought into the Vuelta a Espana over 10 years ago, it was raining. It was so steep that guys were just floundering. And David Miller, when he got up to the top, he took his number off and hung it on a signpost and said, you know what? This is just dumb, people. Like, really? What do you think this is, a circus act?
Yeah, there's a fine line between being dramatic, explosive, and spectacular, and crossing over that ridge and going down the backside into just ridiculously tough.
And really, sometimes the only difference is the weather. If the weather holds out today, most of the guys will not complain too much. If all of a sudden the rain comes back in and they just start getting hammered on the climb, there's going to be a lot of people complaining about this climb at the end of the day.
Hard to put together the perfect race profile. A couple of years ago, the Giro d'Italia was criticized for being too tough, having too many of these climbs that were steep and beyond reason. And so they had to dial it back this year. So you're always on that fine line between creating something the spectators are going to like, that provides that excitement, but that's not too tough for the racers and still doesn't compromise the product and the competition.
It's a fine line for sure. Angelo Zomagnon, who was the race director of the Giro back in 2011, he lost his job because of the Giro. And it was not just the severity of the climbs, but the long stages where they were in the saddle, the winter sometimes over 7 hours. And then they had these long transfers. So this, you know, they have a lot to think about. This entire Vuelta is in the northern part of Spain. Transfers are shorter. That's good for the riders. Climbs are still very intense, but the stages are shorter, so it's a little bit more manageable.
The Vuelta and the Giro competing with the Tour de France for attention, so it may continue to be difficult in the foreseeable future for these other Grand Tours. Under 20K to go for our leaders, with a lead of just under 6 minutes. It's like we talked about during the stage where Contador rode away, won the stage, and took the overall race lead. Sometimes it's not just about the profile, it's about the riders. The riders make the race, and it's not the course that always dictates the difficulty, it's how the riders approach it.
Absolutely in agreement with you on that, Steve. Every single day, the way the dynamics play out, that's what makes the bike race. That's what makes some days that you don't expect to be so pivotal become the most important day of the entire race, as we saw with Contador in stage 17.
Coming into the town of Guadarrama, the Bola del Mundo climb itself in the mountain range known as the Sierra de Guadarrama. So we're getting closer. The climb itself starts with 11.4 kilometers remaining on the day. Now this is the final of 13 mountain stages, 7 summit finishes, 10 uphill finishes, 6 major mountaintop finishes, and the 3rd summit finish of this 3rd and final week. 4 summit finishes in the first week, 3 in the second, and then 3 more here in the third, really spacing out the mountains more in the Vuelta than they did in the other 2 Grand Tours this year. And it's made it more consistently exciting, you would have to say, than both the Tour and the Giro so far this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been an incredible race of all kinds of action, and man, the battles that we've seen between the top 3 guys in the general classification have just been truly amazing, as they have just slammed each other day by day, and Rodriguez and Contador have finished so close together every day but one.
4 hours deep. Inside of 6K to the start of the climb for the leaders. Now back here with the field, and look who's coming towards the front in the blue with the green helmets. That is Movistar, the team of Alejandro Valverde, who is second on the GC and wearing a white jersey.
If you got any dreams today, you better be ready, because they could be shattered on this final climb 20 days into the bike race. And Valverde has really risen to the occasion, as he came into this race saying he was in a supporting role for Kobo, and now finds himself in second overall.
Now remember, Valverde was the big winner on the final mountain day at the Tour de France this year, and here we are, the final mountain day of the Vuelta.
And honestly, I didn't expect Valverde to be this good in the general classification, Steve. His Tour de France form really was not great. He got that one win, but to have the consistency to fight throughout these 3 weeks, I didn't expect to see it.
Now they really needed him, because J.J. Kobo, the defending Vuelta champion, and Valverde's teammate on Movistar didn't have it from the start, so they needed a plan B to step forward very quickly. And fortunately, Valverde had enough left, and he was ready. I mean, he wore the red jersey in the first week of the competition, and had it not been for that crash in the first few days, he may have been a bigger player for the red jersey in the overall lead than he is right now.
For sure, could have changed this race significantly, and Movistar is definitely up toward the front now, starting to pitch in with Euskaltel, because Euskaltel is having a hard time controlling the breakaway group. Looks like Valverde wants to try and have an option at a stage win here.
He's won 2 stages already.
And how bizarre is that Rodriguez has won 3 stages, but he's in third.
Valverde has won 2 stages. He's in second. Contador has won 1.
And he's in first. And that's usually not the way it works out in the general classification battle. That shows what a raid Contador was able to put together on stage number 6. He's another of the guys who has been punched out the back.
And Movistar now taking over at the front.
Lodewijk was out there for a long time behind that breakaway group. Look at how tall Osterloza is, the second man in the group, as he was out of the saddle there. Really tall professional cyclist.
5 minutes from the front group to the field.
I think the breakaway has a legitimate shot at things at this point. I mean, it's really a bit of an unknown. Last year, or 2 years ago, when this climb first featured, the breakaway never had more than 4 minutes. So we don't have a lot of history to go on to see what a rider will need in terms of a lead to succeed from a breakaway.
And how fresh have some of these riders remained, as Simon Clark, the leader of the King of the Mountains competition, is at the very back of this front group. And now that's a jersey he's going to keep all the way into Madrid tomorrow, and he's going to take home with him at the end of this Vuelta.
He did a masterful job infiltrating this breakaway today to get the points so that he could hold on to that lead, because he had such a narrow lead over Rodriguez coming in with just a couple of points advantage in the mountains classification. And that'll be the first overall classification jersey in the history of that Orica Green Edge team, as they're a first-year squad.
Alberto Contador in the red jersey, and with the Saxo Bank teammates near the front of the field. Alberto Contador is joined up there by Joaquin Rodriguez, who's in a green jersey. He's just a couple of wheels back. Alejandro Valverde, we just saw him a moment ago. He's off to Contador's left in the white jersey behind his Movistar team. So they're starting to set things up. And they know what's coming in the next few kilometers. For our leaders, 3K away from the base of the climb. And these riders here still 5 minutes back on that large leading group.
And though it is 3K away from the start of the official start of the climb for the leaders, they're already climbing, as is the peloton, and they've been climbing for a while, as the climbing started with a long way to go in the stage, 149K in on this 170K stage. So
that's got to be one of the frustrating things, because the profile always tells the riders where the official start of the climb is, but when you're going uphill prior to that, just adds onto the misery.
Yeah, it's about a 10K approach to where they're starting the climb.
Well, the weather is certainly cleared up from the rain we saw earlier. And we've seen it is now sunny on the summit finish, but in the big mountains, that can change quickly. 2 years ago, they finished in the fog. The weather holds for the remainder of stage 20 and the 11.5 kilometer climb that's coming up.
You know, this additional horsepower that's come to the front of the peloton to aid in the chase is definitely going to hurt the chances quite a bit of the breakaway. We're not seeing those time gaps anymore coming off of the GPS units, so we'll see soon enough how much it is tumbling here, with Movistar now putting some fresh legs on the front of the field.
Well, folks, if you need to run to the fridge, hit the bathroom, do it now, because when we come back, we are commercial free through the Bola del Mundo climb at the end of stage number 20.
Also put it into perspective, it goes up over 3,200 feet in only 7 miles.
Up to 7,400 feet in elevation. And really the last 8K are extremely steep. Up to that climb with the rocket-shaped antennas, and they use those for TV, radio communication, because it's wide open, it's way up there, and it's a perfect spot. For riders, it's not necessarily the perfect spot.
Yeah, maybe not quite so perfect. And one of the other things about this climb that they're about to hit is there is no relief. There is no place except for maybe about 1.5 K from the top. It levels out just a little bit, but the rest of the 7 miles, it is relentless, and it's just a question of how steep it is.
2 switchbacks inside the final kilometer before they hit the finish itself. And now at the front of the field, you've got Movistar with the blue jerseys and green helmets, Euskaltel in the orange and black, Saxo Bank in the yellow, blue, and black behind them. And there is the red jersey of overall leader Alberto Contador.
A couple of guys in front of him was Paulo Tiralongo, who was so helpful to him in his stage win several days ago.
Now when it starts to go up, it doesn't stop. It only gets harder, and consistently so.
Eros Kopecky here, testing out of the breakaway group. It looks like he is going to be joined there by Kevin de Weert, the Omega Pharma Quick Step man.
All right, so our big escape group here, this large day-long signature breakaway on stage 20, is going to start this final climb with 5 minutes on the field. Let's see if that can hold up. That is Mikel Asterloza, number 72 at the front for Euskaltel. And again, this is at the head of the peloton.
He's done a lot of work today, and it's going to be really brutal for him just to ride up the climb after what he's done on the front. So de Weert, Kopecky, and I believe that's Bouet, the AG2R man, who has gone up with him.
And Bouet, the highest placed rider on the GC group, that's in the breakaway today, but almost 30 minutes down.
And Bouet's looking like he's struggling just a little bit to match the acceleration there of Kopecky. Really, you know, to get up this climb at this point, they should probably think about riding steady. A lot of big accelerations only serve to soften your legs, and it's going to be hard to finish it off.
Now remember, they've already gone over 4 other difficult climbs today, 3 Category 1s and a Cat 2 before getting to this point. Ian Stannard in the white jersey for Team Sky. He's got Chris Froome behind him. Froome still hanging on to 4th place, but almost 10 minutes back.
A lot of nerves in these guys' heads right now, in their bodies, knowing if you're in the general classification battle, you have to be on for this next 10 kilometers of the race. When you hit the final climb, if you're off at all, your chances will be torpedoed on the Bola del Mundo.
But an interesting scenario for the man in the red jersey, Alberto Contador. It's the first climb in the Vuelta. He hasn't had to worry about time bonuses or about attacking.
Yeah, true. Richie Porte now has gone up the road on the attack as well. Kesiakov there right in front of him. Kesiakov in time trial. Surprise winner, I might add, but his 2nd surprise time trial win of the year. And he's starting to show some people he's very good at that discipline.
10K to the finish.
The 3rd man in the group there is the former Vuelta winner, Denis Menchov. So Menchov, one of the big names that we knew was in the breakaway group, who's been very quiet so far. And Porte, he's going to go off already and try and push these guys.
Now, if we see one acceleration after another from this 6-rider leading group, it could be a long, tough road up to the summit finish. A lot of tired legs. Maxime Bouet, Frederick Kesiakov here, coming off the back, losing contact. Now, this is as easy as the climb gets, so enjoy it while it lasts.
Indeed. Menchov now having a look back at Porte and De Weert. Looks like De Weert riding the wheels. Porte and Menchov are going to be doing the pacemaking.
So much of the focus for Team Sky has been on Chris Froome. You forget that Sky does have other good climbers like Porte, Rigoberto Urán, Sergio Henao. They have a lot of good guys in the big mountains.
And just to give you an idea how much teamwork Richie Porte has been doing, he came into the day 2 hours, 6 minutes down in the general classification because he does these huge moves and these efforts for Froome, and then he sits up and saves his legs for the next day.
Here in the field, Robert Haysink in the orange and blue for Rabobank has moved his way towards the front. Now sitting in the first half dozen wheels. Haysink sitting in 6th on the GC and even 12 minutes behind our leader Contador. Still 5 minutes behind.
Amazing, actually, that the peloton has not closed it down more. So Eros Kopecky making it back up, creating a 4-man group at the front.
Menchov, a 2-time Vuelta a Espana winner, now at the front of the stage.
Winner of the Giro d'Italia a few years back. Well, that was a great Giro.
3-time Grand Tour winner overall, but more of a support rider now for other top GC riders at this stage of his career. Long stretched out field, 5 minutes behind, with our leaders inside of 9K to the summit finish.
Kopecky mentally trying to put himself, struggled back up, but getting dropped once again. That's a sign that the guy is wanting it mentally, but he just doesn't have the physical to make it happen.
All right, so it's the long, slow grind on the lower slopes of this climb that's going to get punitively difficult near the top. So if you are a Valverde, a Rodriguez, somebody who's hoping to take back a chunk of time today on the final day for any kind of GC battle, when would you make your move? Considering it is so steep at the very top.
The big challenge for the GC men, and I think the real challenge today is for Rodriguez to try and move into second. The problem for him is that it looks like there's a high likelihood now the time bonuses are going to be taken away. And so it's going to be much harder for him to get the 46 seconds he needs. But you got to go a little bit early. You can't wait till the last kilometer. But ultimately, it's all about sensing the moment, looking at your competitors and feeling how you feel, and then going at the right time.
Well, we're feeling pretty good because we are brought to you by Refuel Got Chocolate Milk, commercial free the rest of the way on the Bola del Mundo.
Just make sure you get that mustache off before we come on the air.
That's what it takes on a climb like this. A little more than 8K to go for our leaders. They lead this peloton by 5 minutes. Euskaltel in the orange and black, Saxo Bank the yellow, blue, and black. Haysink is up there in the orange and blue for Rabobank. And Movistar in the green helmets, not too far away from the front of the field as well.
Haysink, he's been sitting right up there toward the front for a while now, and he has struggled just a little bit in the high mountains at this year's Vuelta, but maybe he's feeling he's got the legs today.
So the field at the 10K banner. 2K behind our leaders, who are now 8K from the finish, with Richie Porte still out front. Crowds only getting bigger as they go up this Bola del Mundo climb. Again, this is the second time that this climb is featured in the Vuelta. First was 2 years ago, 2010. Vincenzo Nibali just barely hung on to his overall lead. He was wearing the red jersey as the day started. Ezequiel Mosquera, his biggest competition on the general classification, attacked, dropped Nibali on the upper slopes of the Bola del Mundo, but Nibali slowly reeled him back in to preserve that red jersey and win his first ever Grand Tour a day later.
And you'll hear a lot of people out here encouraging Denis Menchov in the breakaway, though. He is Russian, he is married to a Spaniard, and he lives in Spain, and he's very well loved by the Spanish fans.
Back here in the group, Alberto Contador in the red jersey of overall leader, also beloved by the Spanish fans. The most popular rider in his home country. And hoping to hang on in these final 2 days for his second ever Vuelta title.
Watching Valverde, this is the waiting game. You know it's coming. Just got a gel in the system. One more to top up the fuel just for the last efforts of this year's race.
Well, Contador can be defensive today for the first time in the big mountains. And he's not too far from his home in Pinto, near Madrid, a little less than an hour away from this climb. Contador says he knows this Bola del Mundo climb well, has trained on it, but doesn't make it a regular stop on his training regimen because it's just too hard.
Because it sucks to train on a climb like that. Did you just notice Igor Anton's face? The Euskaltel rider that his team's been on the front for all day, he does not look good. He looked twisted already.
Well, the margin to our leaders really not coming down very much. Next time will be taken as the field hits the 9K banner, and it's still going to be 5 minutes. You can't rule anything out on such a steep climb like this, but it is looking better for the breakaway at this point. Menchov in the red and white rotates to the front.
So notice they don't quite have 2 full kilometers advantage now because the speed is coming down, the climb is getting steeper.
Contador in the middle of the screen. Andrew Talansky, the American for Garmin Sharp, is also in this group. One of 4 Americans in the race, and clearly the best riding American in the GC here at this year's Vuelta. Talansky's been terrific and hanging on to a top 10, currently in 8th at 13 minutes back.
His director says he'd really like to see him gain a couple more spots in the GC on today's stage. So some action out of the peloton now.
Andrew Talansky, number 91 for Garmin Sharp, just behind the green jersey of Joaquim Rodriguez. Near the front of this GC group. That's 5 minutes back of our leaders. Talansky in his 2nd ever Grand Tour. His first was the Vuelta last year. And riding alongside our race leader, Alberto Contador in the red, who's also alongside the white jersey of Alejandro Valverde. So all of these riders where you would expect them at this point late in the stage.
Always good to ride close to your competition, to lose track of them. Remember, that's the one mistake Valerio Piva told me on stage 17 when Contador got away from Rodriguez. He said Rodriguez was in front of Alberto. Alberto attacked from behind, got the element of surprise, and Katusha had already been chasing so long they were not able to control him.
This is at the front of the stage. Richie Porte giving way to Denis Menchov. Been a while since we've seen Menchov in this position. Final climb of a big Grand Tour stage, riding at the very front.
He seems to be a little bit past his prime and has slotted himself into a worker's role of Katusha. I mean, when you got Rodriguez to ride for, there's a lot of potential there.
The gap is up to 5:22, so it's going out instead of down.
The peloton just eased off just a little bit. And that's how breakaways win races. Day-long breakaways don't outpower the peloton. They ride steady, and that can be the quickest way. If the peloton messes around, that's how they win.
Contador on the right-hand side of the road. And what's going to make it especially difficult for somebody like Rodriguez or Valverde, someone thinking of trying to gain back time on Contador today, is the fact that not only is he protecting the race lead, but presumably he's now at his best. He said coming into the Vuelta, because of the suspension and because of the fact he hadn't raced in so long, that it was going to take him a while and he wouldn't be at his best until the final week. Well, here we are at the end of the final week, so you got to believe Contador is in the best form he's had at this year's Vuelta, so to try and beat him now on the final summit finish is really a tall order.
And I can remember very clearly back to stage number 3, the first summit finish in Ibar, when Contador attacked a half dozen times, and your comment was, wow, if that's not your best, everybody else better look out.
Yeah, and that was him just riding into form.
And he was not able to make it happen that day. In fact, he finished just out of where he wanted to be, but nevertheless, he was the animator, and he kept bringing that animation day after day.
And he says he's been feeling better day by day here. And he just hung close enough to Rodriguez in those days where Rodriguez would sneak out the time bonuses at the end of the stage and add time to his lead over Contador. Alberto would hang just close enough to make that decisive move on 17, stage 17 of this race, make it count.
That's what it's all about when you're getting into these big stage races, is not allowing yourself to be eliminated on any one day. There are very few opportunities to win the race overall, but every day is an opportunity to lose the race overall.
Rodriguez, Valverde, and Contador. Neighbors in the peloton. Green, red, and white jerseys. Joaquim Rodriguez wore red for 2 weeks of this race, has won 3 individual stages. But now, really just targeting the man in the white jersey, Alejandro Valverde, in second place, with Andrew Talansky there, number 91 for Garmin Sharp, hoping to move up more safely inside the top 10.
Notice he was taking some looks over his right shoulder there, looking at Rodriguez in the green jersey, just kind of keeping an eye on things. And Talansky has said that he's not a real fan of the super steep climbs, but he is a fan of long, hard climbs. So the stage that we had that was a 30% grade for the last 2 kilometers, definitely not in his wheelhouse. But today, because it's long and steep, I think he'll be pretty happy about today's finish.
And our leaders have to be feeling better about themselves right now. The lead is still over 5 minutes, and they're just grinding away, inching closer to the summit. Richie Porte ahead of Dennis Menchov, and then Kevin de Vert.
These guys have got to feel very good about their chances right now with that gap still over 5 minutes. If this keeps going like this for much longer at all, you have to say one of these 3 guys is going to win the stage.
It's funny, you look at the pace that they're riding, and it doesn't look like they should be gaining time, but they're just steadily moving it forward to lead out to 5:20 now with 5K to go.
Yeah, and Peloton doesn't look particularly fast either, but if you count the heads there, there are only about 30 guys left. So it's just burning guys out the back, and it's not a bunch of flamboyant attacks and big moves that are making things happen. It's the steady grind that is causing all the trauma amongst these guys.
Robert Hayes-Sink for Rabobank in the orange and blue has been up and down in his form over the course of this Vuelta. Trying to have a good final weekend, finish in the top 5 after saying that his initial goal was the podium in the first week of the race. Currently sitting 6th.
It's 31 seconds out of 5th spot. That's Danny Moreno. And Beñat and Chosti making the early move there from the group. So maybe now things will start to change.
Just hanging on to a top 10 while working for Alejandro Valverde.
It does look like Igor Anton is the man coming up in the orange.
Hayes-Sink also trying to ride across.
Anton, the last couple times I've seen him here on this climb, he has looked absolutely like he was suffering. And that is him.
Now some more suffering in store, no doubt. Winner Anacona, number 112 for Lampre at the back of this group. The riders coming off the back. That was Ivan Velasco in the orange and black for Euskaltel. Just struggling to hang on.
Going to be a lot of that from here to the top, as we're going to see nothing but this group getting more and more whittled down.
Half a dozen K remaining.
And 5 minutes, I think that honestly, for these guys, they're not going to be able to catch all 3 of the men that are out front.
Which is just fine for the man in red there, Alberto Contador. Doesn't need to worry about the time bonuses. He's okay with others like these 3 non-threatening GC riders gobbling those up at the finish. Richie Porte, Dennis Menchov, and Kevin de Vert in that order at the front. They have 4K left to go.
Oh, this is Chosti on the right, up the left side, attacking Anton. Lawrence ten Dam, the Rabobank man on the front of the group that was just looking around with his jersey open.
Now this is not the first attack on a summit finish by Igor Anton, but nothing has stuck so far for the Spaniard. He's put in accelerations before, but each and every time he's been brought back.
Well, to a certain extent, you have to really agree with his tactic right now. He has not been the best climber of the bike race. So if he waits and tries to hammer it out with Contador, Rodriguez, Valverde, they're probably going to drop him. So he's going a little bit further out while they watch each other, and he's going to hope that he has the legs to catch up to these guys and somehow pull it off.
The chairlift is the easy way up. But the Bola del Mundo is a concrete service road up to the very top of the mountain itself, and that's what these guys have to ride up today, the final summit finish of this year's Vuelta. So the field's starting to come apart as we work our way inside the final few kilometers, the final summit finish, and here's an attack by Alejandro Valverde with Contador right on his wheel.
A very quick response by Contador, not wanting Valverde to go anywhere. Moreno bringing up his team leader, Rodriguez, behind. Rodriguez in the green jersey there.
Andrew Talansky right behind Rodriguez as well, the American for Garmin Sharp. Valverde swings off. Contador, though, stays right behind him.
So that was more of a probing attack than a throw everything into the attack. We may see some much bigger moves later on in the race.
And right now, these three are still in position to take the time bonuses. If they finish together, Menchov in the red and white, Divert in the light blue and white, and then Richie Port of Sky in the dark blue. They're coming up on the final 3K. Now remember, the road from this point to the finish averages 15%. Its steepest point will be 23%, 500 meters from the line itself. And still a 5-minute margin.
And they're going to need a big margin because from here up, everything is absolutely brutal as they hit these last kilometers of this climb.
Weather terrific, though. It was raining earlier, but bright and sunny now. Maybe glancing up, seeing the ski lift and saying, well, that's the sensible way to go. This is the insane approach. But our leaders are on to the toughest part of the climb now in that 3K stretch to the end. Robert Haysink at the front of this GC group, still 5 minutes down the road. American Andrew Talansky is fourth in line. But we still have Valverde, Rodriguez, and Contador. They're at the back of the group.
Nicholas Roach sitting there in the second spot. He was in the top 10, I believe 6th the last time, and the only other time this climb has been used in the bike race 2 years ago.
Igor Antone in the orange and black for Euskaltel. His team did so much work earlier at the front of the field, trying to set him up for a potential stage win, but it doesn't look like it's going to be his day the way things are going.
Going to be very tough to catch all three of the guys up the road. Obviously, Divert already in trouble as Menchov now leading Port here. And look at how brutally steep this is.
Back here, Joaquim Rodriguez in front of Valverde and Contador hanging alongside. Valverde put in the first acceleration among the top three on the GC. Contador responded right away, and then Rodriguez came across. We're all back together, 4K from the summit. At the very front of the stage, Menchov and Port. So if it stays this way, who do you like among this duo, Todd Gogolski?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Well, I had to wait till they got
17% grade. You know what, Steve? It's a toss-up. It's just whoever's going to have the better day. I mean, on the season, Port has been a much better rider, but he's done a lot of work in this year's Vuelta for Froome, and so it may come down to who has the fresher legs today, I should say.
GC group getting smaller as we're back out front.
And these riders just have to point right into the crowd and hope people move out of their way. When's the last time you were that close to the athletes at an NBA game, Steve?
Not when I had front row seats, but couldn't lean in like that as they were coming past. Igor Anton here by himself. Menchov leading Port. And it will get steeper. Contador has a few teammates with him back here in the GC group.
You see that? He just touched the hip of one of his workers and said, let's go ahead, bring up the pace just a little bit, take me up to the front. And they are just about to get onto the concrete part of the climb where things really ramp up and things get very narrow.
So just inside of 3.5 kilometers to go for this GC group, and this is the point from which it will average 15% the rest of the way.
You could see people getting stuffed up a little bit there. Andrew Talansky on the left, about 2/3 the way back, kind of bumping shoulders with one of the Sky Riders.
2K for our two leaders. And still the steepest part of the climb to go, where it hits 23%.
Denis Menchov, a 3-time Grand Tour winner. Richie Port spent many days in the overall race leader's jersey of the Giro d'Italia a few years ago. Obviously, neither of these guys going to win this race overall, but a monumental stage win is on the line here at the Bola del Mundo.
Menchov has won 4 individual stages of the Vuelta. Richie Port has never won a Grand Tour stage. The GC group back here, several minutes down. Joaquim Rodriguez just ahead of Contador, who is just ahead of Valverde.
And it's Chris Froome sitting right behind Valverde as these two continue to swap poles on the front, but it's mostly just that they're not attacking each other. There's not a whole lot of draft you're going to get at this speed.
And a climb this steep, the 5th mountain of the day, sometimes just a matter of survival when you're dealing with this. That just about says it all.
Yeah, that is a postcard you could write home about.
Provided you're not cross-eyed from the severity of the slope. The GC group here.
12 riders left approximately in this group. Talansky still hanging on at the back.
A kilometer and a half to go to the summit for our two leaders. Part of a 20-rider breakaway earlier in the stage. It's now down to this.
And some of this roadway is so incredibly bumpy that it just makes it that much harder. It's already brutally steep, but then you have to bounce around and hard to get the transfer of power.
Steady as she goes. With the top of the general classification. All the riders clustered there in that group behind these two leaders on the stage. Now the pace up here a little bit.
Definitely freshening as Majka, the Polish rider for Saxo Bank on the front, starting to stretch some legs.
Richie Port in the dark colors, the best young rider at the Giro d'Italia a couple of years ago. Looking for his first ever Grand Tour stage win. Boy, would this be a huge one.
It would be a fantastic win for his career. I mean, his career, the trajectory is up. Menchov is trying to maintain for as long as he can. He's just not the most competitive rider like he was in seasons past.
Almost 20%. When you're passing ski lifts, you know it's steep. Back here, Rodriguez, just ahead of Contador. He loves the steep moments in a climb. You got to remember that.
Everybody utilizing special gearing back there in that group behind. These guys on the front, they look like they're grinding it out a little bit more. Whereas the overall classification men back here, spinning just a bit more. Contador, the chief among them.
Yeah, Rodriguez has his teammate in front of him, then Contador followed by Valverde. So Rodriguez maybe setting up to go for something here.
See Benyat and Chosti just coming off the back there, suffering as he goes. It's Moreno on the front, then his team leader Rodriguez, then Contador, and then Valverde.
Moreno himself trying to protect the top 5 on the GC.
He said he'd like to not only help Rodriguez win the stage and the overall, but he'd like to hold on to his 5th. So at this point, for Rodriguez to win the overall is going to be pretty tough.
Just about 1 kilometer to go for our two leaders, Port and Menchov. Look at how difficult it is. Inside of 2K for these riders. Rodriguez in the green, Contador the red, Valverde the white.
And there we go.
Joaquim Rodriguez makes the acceleration. Contador immediately responds. Here comes Valverde across.
Valverde coming across just a little bit slow, but that might actually be the smarter move. When you go super deep on an attack on a climb like this, almost impossible to recover.
Nobody is better on the planet on the steepest climbs than Joaquim Rodriguez, but Contador also extremely good, and he's looking fresh.
And it looked like Valverde was actually just getting distance again, so he obviously was not just trying to do the smarter move by coming back slow, but he was also in trouble.
Alejandro Valverde now losing some time to our two leaders.
Now remember, he's got a 46-second advantage over Rodriguez between 2nd and 3rd.
So Rodriguez ahead of Contador, and a couple of seconds back to Valverde. And now Rodriguez accelerating away from Contador.
Wow, he has gotten rid of Alberto. We have not seen him do a move like this yet.
Well, Rodriguez could definitely be moving back into 2nd in the overall general classification because he's dropped Valverde. Contador having trouble hanging with him. Still potentially a time bonus out there for Rodriguez if he can continue at this pace. But definitely.
Well, before the stage started, Rodriguez said he wanted to win the mountains, the points, and the overall, and the stage. Not that he set his sights very high, mind you.
Contador leading Rodriguez by 2 minutes, 21 seconds as the day started. Our two leaders coming up towards the finish. Richie Port just ahead of Dennis Menchov. Alberto Contador losing some time to Joaquim Rodriguez. That's the gap. Contador's on the left-hand side of the screen, Rodriguez the far right.
And they're still passing riders who had been in the early break. But the two men out front continue to soldier on and try and hold on for the stage win.
Rodriguez surging. Our two leaders trying to hang on. Contador trying to make his way back up to Rodriguez.
Contador's got a nice advantage in the general classification, so he's got that buffer to play with. 135 is what Rodriguez needs to make on Alberto. No, excuse me, that's 221.
Richie Port, number 185, Denis Menchov, 106. They're going to fight it out for the stage win on what has quickly become the iconic Bola del Mundo summit finish, even though it's being used for just the second time in the Vuelta. It's become a landmark climb because of scenes like this.
And the crowd even bigger than the first go-round.
Port and Menchov, who's going to have it left in the legs after almost 5 hours on the 5th climb of the day.
And I'm surprised we have not seen a single attack, not even a surge that was visible from these two guys yet.
Kevin DeVert for Omega Pharma Quickstep dropped from our two leaders earlier. And now here we go.
He may still be third on the road, however. Alberto struggling.
Isolated. Trying to minimize the time loss to Rodriguez at this point. Joaquin Rodriguez in the green jersey just ahead of Contador on the road.
Well, Rodriguez, it's going to be, oh, Menchov is gone.
Menchov accelerating away from Richie Port. Denis Menchov, the two-time Vuelta a Espana winner, riding into his 5th individual stage victory at the Spanish Grand Tour.
He kept it very late, as there's just not much left in the legs, but Menchov, a very deserving stage winner here today.
So Menchov gets the maximum time bonus of 12 seconds. Richie Port will finish second. He'll take an 8-second bonus. And now we just have one third-place time bonus of 4 seconds available on the road.
And certainly Joaquin Rodriguez would like to get up into the 3rd spot, but I think there are still more men out on the road in front of him. He's trying to come up with 46 seconds to surpass Valverde and move up into 2nd overall.
There's Rodriguez in the green jersey. Valverde back there in the white. He's been dropped by Rodriguez.
And DeVert there for 3rd, so the time bonuses are gone.
Igor Antone through the crowd, perhaps. Now other riders from the breakaway also coming back. Eros Kopecky here for Liquigas in the green and white. But this is the GC battle.
Look at this, Valverde has made it up to Alberto Contador, so Contador really was struggling.
Valverde once again showing his patience and maturity and just reeling guys back in on a steep climb. And now they're chasing Rodriguez.
And Rodriguez once again showing why he really, in many minds, was the winner of this race. It was but for one day where his team lost control of the bike race that he has lost this race overall. But on these summit finishes, he has been the best.
Now Joaquin Rodriguez thinking about moving back into 2nd place in the overall, ahead of Alejandro Valverde, who's currently in 2nd. But right now Rodriguez has a gap on Valverde in the white jersey.
And you can see him just flogging himself. There is no fluidity whatsoever in turning those pedals over. It is just punishing his body.
Now remember, in the final kilometer, they hit the maximum slope of 23%. And boy, check out this gap now, back to Contador and Valverde.
It looks like he has a legitimate shot at passing Valverde.
Oh, Valverde has passed Contador. He realizes what's at stake here.
Oh, he knows it. He knew it going in. He knew that he knew that Rodriguez was going to attack him and try and take the 2nd place away.
And Contador almost bumping into a spectator on these narrow roads. Alberto Contador may be riding into his best form, but on slopes as steep as this, nobody is going to look good.
No, definitely not. And Contador is obviously not at his best here today. He is suffering. Danny Moreno sitting on him, the teammate of Joaquim Rodriguez, who is just putting the hammer down on the other GC men right now.
Rodriguez hoping to hold on to the green jersey and win the points competition, perhaps move back up into second place on the GC. Valverde, a couple of seconds ahead of Contador now, but Rodriguez is ahead of them both. Time bonuses not a factor anymore. It's just about the physical gap between this man Rodriguez and the others behind him, Valverde and Contador. Again, nobody's better on the steepest climbs than Joaquim Rodriguez, and now he crosses the line. And let's see what the gap's going to be back to Alejandro Valverde. Here he comes in the white jersey.
So Thiago Machado holding on from the break, but about 3:37 unofficially when Rodriguez crossed the line.
Valverde with a little kick here at the finish, and it looks like he's going to preserve second place.
Yeah, he should preserve it. It maybe was halved, but he should hold on to second.
And now we wait for Alberto Contador. Now remember, Contador had a minute and a half on Valverde, 2:21 on Rodriguez when the day started, and now Contador crosses over.
So it doesn't look like there's going to be any change at the top of those standings. 40 seconds roughly behind Perito, but he had over 2-minute advantage coming in. So a brutal mountain day, but it was not able to change the overall classification at the top.
It was a struggle for all of them, but in the end, the top three on the GC will remain unchanged. Contador, Valverde, and Rodriguez, with one day now left to go at the Vuelta a Espana. Surviving as much as anything from a 20-man breakaway, Menchov grabs stage glory, and we'll check out the general classification now after 20 stages when we come back. 20 days in, one remaining, and our general classification features Alberto Contador with a lead now of 1:16 over Alejandro Valverde, and Joaquim Rodriguez still in third at 1:37 back. Stage 21, the final day of racing, and parading into the Spanish capital of Madrid, the traditional ending point for the Spanish Grand Tour. With the general classification now set at the top, Alberto Contador ahead of Alejandro Valverde and Joaquim Rodriguez in the top three. Chris Froome, also one of the pre-race favorites, locked into the top five. And the American Andrew Talansky, one of 4 U.S. riders in the race, finishes 7th at just over 13 minutes back. Right into Madrid, ironically enough, the southernmost point of this year's Vuelta.
It's a very short day for the guys, 115 kilometers, about 71 miles. They started earlier in the day in Cercedilla. They're just about into Madrid now to make their finishing circuits, and it's been very mellow so far, but those laps at the end will heat up significantly. Notice that there are 380-degree turns on every one of the laps, so it makes for a very interesting finishing circuit indeed.
Overall, it is the 69th time that the Vuelta has finished in Madrid. Sunny, warm day, and we are now live with our overall race leader, Alberto Contador, who is going to finish in red, wearing that leader's jersey for the 4th day. Hasn't won it all that much at this year's race, but he's wearing it when it counts on the last day of competition.
He really was challenged in this Grand Tour by Joaquim Rodriguez. When Rodriguez held the jersey through the Stage 11 time trial, we knew we had an incredible bike race on our hands. And really, the way it came to pass, every big mountain day, Alberto was beat by Rodriguez.
It was so frustrating for him early in the race as he attacked so many times, but could never get rid of Rodriguez, couldn't take the maximum time bonuses because Rodriguez was defensive enough to catch Contador on the uphill finishes and then pass him to pick up those time bonuses ahead of Contador, but he never gave up hope.
He never did. In fact, he kept saying, I'll be back tomorrow to do something else, to try and make something else happen. And Contador with his entire team on the front now, so the pace picking up a bit from the first hour, which was very leisurely. But this race, if it had not been for stage number 17, the medium mountain days, or the medium mountain stage, Alberto Contador would not have won. He actually lost time yesterday on the Bola del Mundo to Rodriguez, which was the last big mountain finish of the race.
Taking their appropriate position at the front of the field as other riders start to launch up the road. Lamprey rider just making a surge, and things stretched out at the back. 55.5 kilometers left to go. Hitting the finish line for the first of 10 times around here today. Now some teams still missing out on a stage win. And we've had 10 altogether that have won stages at this year's Vuelta. So that means that 12 other teams have not won a stage, more than half the field. So we'll see if those teams make a concerted effort to try and finally snag a win on the final day.
This little group here trying to coalesce and get it together off the front, but the pack is right behind them at this point.
Lamprey is one of those teams that has missed out on a stage win. They have a rider at the front in the pink and blue here. Team Sky also looking for their first win, and they have a legitimate shot today with sprinter Ben Swift. So we'll see how it all comes together at the end. Break trying to form here with now under 55 kilometers left to go in the 2012 Vuelta a Espana. Now the iconic Plaza de Cibeles and the fountain that the riders pass by every time they come through the Spanish capital on the last day of the Vuelta. So Contador sitting on Valverde's wheel at the front of the field. They are a few seconds behind a 6-rider breakaway of course, non-threatening GC riders, as you would expect on this final day of the Spanish Grand Tour. We'll see how much time they get on a sunny, very pleasant early September day in Madrid. One of the 3 U-turns on the circuit. And our 6-rider group off the front, not getting much time. In fact, almost in position to be brought back.
And these 180-degree turns are very weird in a bike race. The first guys go through nice and single file. Right behind them, everybody gets all bunched up like in a traffic jam, and they slow down a lot, and then they re-accelerate a huge amount as they come out.
That's the gap between the group and the field. Not much.
No, they're barely hanging on to just a few seconds. Osterloza on the front. We saw him doing a ton of work for Igor Anton yesterday. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Anton. He went on the attack, but was immediately passed by Rodriguez and Contador when they started drilling it at the end. Another interesting guy in this move is Kevin Seeldraers, who was just pulling through for Astana. He was in the break yesterday, and in the final handful of kilometers on the climb, he lost over 17 minutes.
Now, this is the 69th time that the Vuelta has finished in the Spanish capital of Madrid. It's the traditional ending point. But next year, there is some conversation that they may actually end this race on a climb on a volcano in the Canary Islands. So they may forego the pageantry of the last day and instead make it a real race. A competitive final stage up the volcano.
You know, Stephen, I have to say I'm mixed on that. I know a lot of people really long to have a crazy final day where the whole race is still in play. But I also am somewhat attached to this, where you come into Madrid and there's a big crowd and they can see the riders for multiple laps. And it's not so much about the general classification as just somebody getting a stage win. I mean, there are pros and cons to both formats.
I think there's an argument to be made on both sides. It's very nice to have this type of a finish where the crowd can see the riders multiple times coming around on the various circuits, and you can really celebrate the race because it's been 3 long, hard weeks, and it is that moment to soak it all in.
Yeah, I mean, look at the size of the crowds. They know they're not going to see a general classification battle today, but they're out here to respect and celebrate the riders and the bike race. These guys have been on their bikes for 21 days, over 2,000 miles. And it's a great way to see them a lot and look for, you know, have a party, have a good time, and then watch a blazing field sprint at the end.
Light green trim, that is Argo Shimano riding for the most prolific sprinter in this race so far, John Degenkolb. Sky in the dark colors with the blue helmets, they are riding for Ben Swift. Also saw some Rabobank riders up there in the orange and blue earlier. They would be riding for Matty Breschel, who hasn't been much of a factor in the sprints this year, but has won in the past in Madrid.
And maybe he thinks he's got something that we haven't seen yet. And now 4 Liquigas Cannondale men on the front as they have the stranglehold on the front of the bunch.
Elia Viviani is their top sprinter.
And he's been fairly anonymous, although he's been close a couple times early in the race. Did get a 3rd spot once, bumping shoulders with Swift right in the final as they approach the line.
And with all of the other classifications just about locked up, for the sprinters to win on the final day of a Grand Tour on a big stage like the capital of the country you're riding in, that's a big deal. To win in the Champs-Élysées at the Tour de France or in Madrid at the end of the Vuelta, and that's a signature victory.
Yeah, these are big days for a professional cyclist to get this for your team and to put this on your resume as a rider. It's a big deal. Your sponsors love it. Everybody loves it.
And they've gotten a pretty good look at the finale. This will be their 10th time across the finish line when they end the stage for real here shortly. So they know the run-in. They know what to expect. Pretty straightforward. Classic field sprint coming up. Didn't have much of a breakaway that never got more than about 13, 14, 15 seconds.
Yeah, everybody kept it very close. They just didn't want to lose control of things on this final day, so a little bit maybe more eager to keep it together at the end. Well, right behind the lineup of Liquigas men, we have a bunch of the Argo Shimano guys there. So they've got strength in numbers for John Degenkolb. Still left, still ready to hit it hard.
And Team Sky is going to do everything possible to deliver Ben Swift to the win as they pass by the Plaza de Cibeles once again, which is where the podium presentation will be after the end of this stage. It is a typical gathering spot for sports celebrations in Madrid. The soccer team Real Madrid typically goes there to celebrate all of their big European soccer wins. And that's where they will have the podium set up at the end of today's final day of racing.
And look at the effort here on the right, the drag race. Argo Shimano trying to come up around Liquigas Cannondale, and they just can't get it going yet. These are literally, when you're a lead-out man at this point in the race, you hit the front and you do basically a sprint pull. You go flat out as fast as you possibly can go and then get out of the way.
Think about what Team Sky is trying to do here as they look for their first stage win of this year's final Grand Tour. 1K left to go. Almost 2 hours, 45 minutes in, and it's Argo Shimano that has supplanted Sky at the front in the white with the green trim, trying to deliver Degenkolb to another win.
And pretty far back there is Ben Swift, so he's got a lot of heavy riding to do to make it up inside this final kilometer.
On the Champs-Élysées at the final stage of the Tour de France, Wiggins let out Cavendish. Will Froome lead out Swift here. But Sky has fallen off the pace here. This is all about Argo Shimano right now at the front. Now John Degenkolb launching his move in the final 200 meters. He's got Elia Viviani behind him. Daniela Bonatti is there. Here comes Viviani. Bonatti up the middle. And it's going to be Degenkolb who sneaks it out. His 5th stage win of this year's Vuelta.
That was close. Degenkolb barely held on there at the line. But he gets 5, and Contador gets the overall general classification.
John Degenkolb, the stage win. Alberto Contador, the GC victory as the Vuelta comes to a close today in Madrid. John Degenkolb, the 23-year-old German, with his 5th stage win of this year's Vuelta, his 11th victory this season.
Do you think that meant much to him? He threw his bike on the ground. He is ecstatic, and he's had to survive 11 days since his last stage win through the mountains to get this 5th one.
And for Alberto Contador, his 2nd Vuelta win after his first back in 2008.
And his friend Paulo Tiralongo there congratulating him, who was actually instrumental in Contador's overall win from stage 17.
Now 5 Grand Tours in the career of the greatest Grand Tour rider of this generation, Spain's Alberto Contador. If the cycling world didn't know about sprinter John Degenkolb before the Vuelta, they certainly know him now as he finishes the Spanish Grand Tour, having won 5 of the 6 field sprints at this race, and he spoke about it afterwards.
So there's no better way to close the Vuelta a España?
For sure not. For sure not. That's, yeah, amazing. Just amazing, and I'm really, I cannot find the right words. Maybe there are no words for that, and well, just I'm done.
For your confidence, how does it mean, this one, this 5-1, and this Vuelta a España in general?
It's, yeah, really unbelievable, because there was now a lot of pressure on us. We made one sprint not that good, and didn't find each other 3 days ago, and yeah, now we are so happy that we could make such a performance. I think we showed that we are, yeah, really high-end level of sprint lead out, and that's it.
And for you personally?
Just satisfied, really 100% satisfied, and there's no better way to go home now.
What is the first objective? The next objective, sorry?
At first, a few glasses of beer and champagne this night, and then I will enjoy 1 week rest at home, going for 1 race in France, and then the World Championship.
So enjoy the party and congratulations.
Thank you.
And this is the way his 11th win of the season unfolded.
Takes it from the front, Bonatti on his wheel, Bonatti sitting up, Viviani coming around for second, but there was no question that Degenkolb was the fastest guy in this Vuelta. He probably could have won 6 if they had just gotten their lead-out train dialed in on stage 18. But as you heard him say in that interview, they couldn't find themselves. It's always very chaotic leading into these field sprints. To execute this well, this consistently means a lot. This team has started to really put these lead-outs together.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't the highest class of sprinters at the Vuelta this year, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see Degenkolb go up against the likes of Cavendish, Greipel, Tyler Fair, and some of the others in the next few years. And take note of the man in the red jersey raising his arms as he crossed the line in the middle of the field, the overall Vuelta winner, Alberto Contador. And now this is the podium celebration for our stage winner today. John Degenkolb, the 23-year-old German, celebrating the victory at the Plaza de Cibeles in the Spanish capital for the 5th time. At this year's race, he brings home a stage victory, and no doubt one he will remember.
Fantastic ride by him and his team to get the 5th win, and still amazing to see that he's not even in the top few guys in the points classification, because they all got so many points on the summit finishes. That was a goal of his, to try and win the points competition as well, but it was just out of reach.
What do you think about Degenkolb going up against Cavendish and some of the other top sprinters in 2013 now?
Well, right now, what I've seen from him, he's not as fast as the fastest guys. And however, he's 23, so he's still maturing, and he's maturing, you know, to big steps better year over year. So he could still be very good and very competitive against Cavendish.
Well, it just adds to the sprinter pool that we have in the sport right now, and it's only remained the most popular rider in his home country. And now, celebrating his 5th Grand Tour title and his 2nd Vuelta. He played soccer as a young boy until the age of 14, and then his brother Fran got him into cycling, and he really started winning races almost immediately at the amateur level. His talent was apparent right from the outset.
And his family was too poor to get him a bicycle. Soccer didn't require the investment to get involved, and he actually got a loaner bike, a beater bike from a local club, and that's how he got into cycling.
He's the 3rd of 4 kids in his family, has his older brother Fran, who's also his agent, also an older sister, a younger brother. Fran is here in the crowd today, as well as Contador's mother, Francisca, his wife, Macarena. And now he can celebrate with the family. Mission accomplished.